do a little housekeeping first for everybody. The way that we're going to address questions, if you were not here during the first workshop on Wednesday, we're going to have speakers from the industry side, and we're going to have speakers that are growers themselves. And it's going to be a little bit of a mixture of both. So at the end of every speaker's presentation, we're going to have a time for questions, except if it's a grower. If it's a grower, we're going to have a casual conversation with them. I'm going to ask them some questions to get the ball rolling. So as the speaker is talking, start typing your questions. This is a little bit different than last time. Last time it was just me doing the talking and managing the questions. Now I can manage the questions. So as the person is speaking, feel free to start typing your questions, especially if it's a grower, because we're going to have just a casual organic conversation with them. And I have my contact information here. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach back to me at any point in time. You guys have Ashley's contact information from the registration as well. So both of us, you guys can reach out to any of us on that end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So if you want to start recording, Ashley.
You're good to go.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. Welcome everyone to this second portion of our irrigation water management workshop. If you did not get a chance to join us on last Wednesday on the first portion, we have recorded that and it has made available on our website. So if feel free to let us know if you cannot find it, we can always share with you. Please share with your friends, family members, anybody that might benefit from this content. So today we're going to have speakers from the side of industry, and also we're going to have a couple growers talking about their experience with irrigation water management and different technologies. We're going to begin. I'm very pleased to have our first grower presenter. It's going to be Red San Pedro. Red, if you want to open up your mic and your camera.
Hi guys.
So Red, it's the owner and operator of Field Rouge Vineyard in Mount Veeder. I've been working with Red throughout this year and a little bit of last year. Red was actually a participant on our workshop, this same workshop last July, June, July, and we were communicating and we started working together. We had at the time, we had a program where we could provide growers with money to buy technology to improve their irrigation management. We don't have that funding right now, but we're working really hard to obtain more grant money to be able to do that. Red, we were able to provide him with some soil moisture probes from one of the companies that you're gonna hear about today. And I've been working with Red to develop sort of like a comprehensive irrigation management plan to help them with his operation. Red, thank you so much for joining us today. We're just gonna have a casual conversation with Red, so feel free to ask questions. Red, can you please tell us about your experience with these soil moisture probes? How are they helping you? What is working? What is not working?
I think it's, for me, it was a big deal. First of all, thank you for that. I owe you a lot for that. And we're still learning a lot from it until now. And I keep bothering Miguel every time I have something. I call him and he thanks Miguel for answering the phone all the time. But I want to learn it like more and more to make the work 100% effective. And first, after the irrigation evaluation, after the installation of the moisture probes, and then the water holding capacity, and now, like for me, the big like positive things is I'm cutting my irrigation by half already, half time, where is a lot water conservation, and that's my first point of all this, and I think it's a huge help, not a small help. It's huge because already, like I said, I cut the time that normally I irrigate every week or every other week by half, and I think we had discussion last week with the numbers I get together and stuff, and I think we agreed, Miguel and I, that I'm going to cut a little bit, another hour, hour and a half, and see where it goes. And that make a big difference. If I go from 10 hours to 3.5 hours every time I irrigate, it's wow. You know, I think that's where I am right now.
That's great. And just so that people can get a good idea of what Red has been doing. So Red is a grape grower. So both of the speakers that we're going to have today are grape growers. But the concepts that we are going to talk about, they apply to everything. So both of our speakers today are going to be grape growers using drip irrigation. And that's what everybody in Napa does. So like I said during our workshop before, I'm based in Napa, so I have to have some sort of preference for the crops that are grown here, but the concepts apply to any crop. And if you have specific questions, we can address them. So just to get a better idea, what we did with Red is we installed soil moisture probes in his vineyard. And the way that we install them in two separate ends of his vineyard because he has two very different soil types in his vineyard. And each of those stations has 3 moisture probes. We put one at the root level, we put one above, and then we put one below. And what Red is trying to do is try to understand when he irrigates, if the bottom probe, the very bottom probe is getting wet, that means that he irrigated too much. So that's one of the things that we are trying to work with him. One thing that I want everybody to realize is that if you install any type of technology, but in this case, soil moisture probes, installing them is the first step, but you're still gonna need to learn how to use them. We've been working with Red for several months and he's doing great, and there's still some more room for learning and improving. And that's where we come in. If you decide that you want to try these technologies, the Napa RCD is available to assist you in learning how to use the probes, interpreting the data, and making sure that you are using them to the full potential. So Red, you said that you have cut your water by half now and that you're working on cutting it even more. Do you see any negative impacts on your vines at all?
No, absolutely not. It's much, they're fresh, healthy. The soil is healthy. I never walk in a place that it's over wet or normally I go with the, touch and use the finger in the soil and see if I cannot pour it in, I have to water a little bit and stuff like that. But now, the other point is to measure exactly take me less than 4 minutes to do one station. That means I go weekly, if I measure twice, I have like less than 20 minutes and I have all the data I need. Whereas like amazing, and I'm doing it manually. I go from 1 to 1, I plug and I measure and I see the number, I take the notes, and then I go again and then I follow my water capacity, water holding capacity, and I see where I am, and everything around it's like healthy and fresh and no complaint at all.
That's good. The probes that Red has, they're manual. So you have to walk and then you have another instrument that would collect the numbers and Red writes them down. This is just one type of technology. We are gonna hear from the industry side of things. So you're gonna see that there's different levels. There's some companies that would have you, everything is remotely, goes on your phone, goes on your computer. So Red walks his vineyard, which is, his vineyard is not that big, so it allows him to actually do that. And it's always good to walk your vineyard and see what is going on. But it's also very important to keep record of all of these numbers, whether you are doing manually and writing them down, or whether it's going onto your computer. It's important to keep records because that way you can compare. And that's the way that Red is doing it right now. He compares when he irrigates how wet the soil gets. And then he uses that to make a decision whether he needs to cut down next time he irrigates or if he needs to add more water. And so far, it looks like he's been cutting down. Red, what has been the biggest challenge for you using these probes, working with me, trying to improve and make your irrigation more efficient? Challenges?
No challenges at all. Seriously,
No?
I think it's not a challenge, it's the other way. It's a positive, a happy moment, happy information, more knowledge. And like I said in the beginning, thanks to you guys, because you always answer the phone and answer the emails, and on top of our questions, which is amazing, is the help that normally, in my situation, I will have to pay for it, you know, that I'm getting it from you guys, and I'm using it because make a big difference in my life and in the health of my vineyard, and help me every day, like from day, and it's day and night from before to now. And yeah, no challenges at all. Like the probes are easy. Yeah, the probes are easy to work with. You know, last time we had like one way I couldn't fix it. I called Miguel. Miguel, the same week he was in my vineyard, he fixed it right away. Like I have no complaint at all because it's a happiness, you know.
I'm glad to hear that, Red. And the issue that Red was mentioning is we had one probe that it was not working, and that's one of the things that by working with us or with any other professional, you get to learn when the probes are not doing what they're doing. So this probe, the numbers were showing it was super dry. That's what the numbers were showing, right, Red?
Yeah.
When we had that
exactly.
issue, they were showing super dry, even though he was irrigating. So he automatically noticed, because he had been working with them for a while, he noticed that something was odd because he was irrigating and the pros were telling him that it was completely dry. So I went go ahead and did an assessment, and it turns out that the cable had been ripped off. We don't know if a gopher chewed on it or something happened during the installation, but the probe was broken. But it was really easy. We just replaced it with a new one. And like I mentioned, Red is a participant of a current project that we have where we actually provided the probes for him. And he's one of a few growers that are working with us. In the future, I hope that we can bring more funding, that we can provide that sort of technology for other growers so that you can put it to the test. But that is just the end of the program. Any assistance that I have provided with Red as far as installation, guidance, and just being available for him when he has questions, that is offered for everybody. If anybody here in the audience, or if you know anybody that it's interested, or you're interested, or that already has the probes, you can contact us at no cost. We would help you develop the knowledge that you need to in order to use these probes efficiently. Red, we're not getting any questions from the audience. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us this morning? Would you recommend for people to use this technology in order to improve the irrigation system? Would you recommend them to get assistance with either the Napa RCD or with any other agency?
Highly to go to RCD. It's if you use it, even if you get whatever, the help make a huge difference that you cannot get anywhere else. And I think, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's day and night. The minute you install them, the minute you have the help from RCD, I think anything you get, it's a positive. And again, just to cut this type volume of water that normally goes just to waste. You know, here we're in Mount Vida, everything gets well water, everything gets, you know, it's very precious, and the environment. And these days, you know, any gallon of water you can save, it's better for this world. And I think we're doing our part, and thanks to you guys.
I thank you for those kind words, Red. That's amazing. We have a couple questions, maybe not directly to you. Somebody's is wondering about the size of your farm. It's just shy of an acre, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to have a comparison. So Red is a small grower, and then our next speaker, maybe not next, but eventually today, she manages hundreds of acres with these probes. So that way you can get a comparison. And these probes work with just 1 acre and hundreds of acres. So we'll have that comparison. The probes that Red has installed are the WATERMARK IRROMETER probes. We're going to have a representative from that company to speak a little bit more about how these probes work. And then we're going to hear about other companies as well that have different types of technology. IRROMETER is a company that has been in business for a very long time. And the infrastructure works really well. I like their products, but I also work with other companies. So I would like to share a little bit about all of the other ones. Let's see here. Do you anticipate adding remote tech to these probes? In the case of Red, we don't need to do that because his vineyard is so small, and he actually does everything himself.
I like walking.
Exactly. He's the owner, the operator, the farm worker. He does everything himself, and he does a really good job, if I say so myself. So for him, having him remotely connected doesn't really make sense because it's so easy for him to do it. We're going to hear from another grower later on where hers are partially remote. It's not manual. And then there's always the option of expanding to remote. It comes to a matter of cost. For these growers that are just starting to use this infrastructure, these instruments, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to invest a ton of money. So you can start with just the basic technology and move up as you move on. Somebody's asking you, Red, how many times did you collect the data?
In weekly, I do it twice. And the days that it's very get very hot, the day after that, I always do it just by precaution. But normally I keep myself twice a week. I take my data. And like I said, it's less than 4 minutes by each. I mean, take me like less than 16 minutes and I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's enough for you to get all the information that you need?
For me, for now it's working, but in a day that you're gonna ask me to do it more, I will do it more. I have no problem with that. It's like, yeah, it's 4 minutes here, 4 minutes there.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing a great job. I'm just asking for the sake of conversation, but
yeah.
I think
I think if I do it twice a week, I get the light. I'm always do it before and after irrigation.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that. That's what I suggest. You want to look at the probes before you irrigate. You want to use the probes as a way to decide, like we spoke during our first workshop on Wednesday, to decide if you need to irrigate or not. I've had some cases where people measure it after they irrigate, so the probes always show that they're wet. That defeats the purpose a little bit. So that's where guidance comes in handy. Let's see. Somebody's asking me how these probes different from the neutron probes. That's not a question for you, Red. The neutron probes, there are different types of technologies by which the moisture is measured. The probes that Red has, and we're going to have a representative from IRROMETER talking about these, but they're essentially little gypsum blocks where the water comes in and out, and then you have cables coming in, and then at the end you have a battery. So this battery sends a little current of electricity, and depending on the amount of moisture tells you the difference in the current, and then that shows up in a specific number on the instrument screen. I honestly don't know how the neutron probes work exactly, but I think that we have been phasing out of them. I don't see them often. I honestly have never worked with them myself. I've heard rumors that they might be dangerous. I honestly don't know. I don't know how they work, but these are different ways of measuring the same thing. Both of them are giving you an indication of the amount of water present in the soil. So I can dig more information, Betsy, if you're interested, but I don't have an answer for that. Sorry. Red, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time and joining us today. I know that you probably have to run after this, but thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to continue working with you, and I want to extend that invitation to anybody that would like to get assistance from us. I would give you the same level of dedication. I think that water conservation, it's extremely important for everybody. Red mentioned it. He's doing his part for the environment, but it's also benefiting his vines. You know, keeping them healthy, making sure that they receive the amount of water that they need, and not more, not less. So thank you, Red. I'm gonna let you go. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you later.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. So go ahead and mute yourself, Red. Thank you so much. Okay. So if you guys have any more questions later on for Red, feel free to email me or put it in the chat box, and I'll communicate with him, and I'll give you answers. So let me see here. Ernie, are you with us yet? I don't think Ernie is with us here today. So we're gonna move on to our next speaker. Jacob, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm not sure if you, so go ahead and share your screen so that we can begin your presentation. I'm just gonna do a quick introduction. Jacob Moreno, he's the, I think it's the North Coast, is that it? Or is it just pretty much up in the Northern California section? He's your local representative for Irrometer. Go ahead and start the slideshow as well.
All right.
You might wanna click again. Awesome. So Jacob is our local representative for Irrometer. Irrometer, I'm going to let Jacob talk a little more about the company, but Irrometer has been in business for a long time. And one piece of disclosure that I want to give you, everybody that I invited, all of these industry representatives, I have the pleasure that I have worked with them before. And we have their technology installed in our vineyard. So the Napa RCD owns a 21-acre vineyard in Carneros, where we have 12 acres of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and we use it as a demonstration vineyard. So our vineyard has examples of all of these technologies that you're gonna hear from today. Ideally, if we had this workshop, I will do it in the vineyard and we will walk around and I will show you these technologies. Unfortunately, due to the quarantine situation, we cannot do that. But if anybody wants to visit our vineyard and take a look at these instruments from Irrometer and the other companies that you're gonna hear about, feel free to let me know and we can walk you through them. I think it's easier if you see them firsthand and installed in the soil, and you can kind of ask questions relevant to that. But thank you so much, Jacob, for joining him. Please take it away.
All right. Well, again, my name is Jacob Moreno, and I work for Irrometer Company. Thank you guys very much for giving me your time, and hopefully I can provide some good information. Miguel, I'm pretty nervous, man. This is my first Zoom.
So you're doing great. You're doing great. We're all friends here.
It's very unusual to do this for me, but anyway, let's dig right in. So Irrometer has been around since 1951. The tagline: simple, affordable, reliable. Our products are very, very easy to use, and they're well known around the industry. And let's dig in. So before going into any kind of products that we offer, I think it's important to know what type of unit of measurement we're using for monitoring soil moisture. So the particular unit of measurement that we use is something called soil water tension, which is the physical force or the suction a plant places on the soil to extract the nutrients. In other words, our sensors act as an artificial root to show how hard the plant is working to extract the water from the soil. So neutron probes, as Miguel touched on earlier, they give you a different reading. Volumetric sensors give you a percentage of moisture, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's available to the crop at all times. We feel that the tension, the stress reading is the best indicator in order to help you predict how to irrigate. If we can keep our plant at low stress, then we're going to have better quality, quantity. The whole thing's going to be better. And I'll explain what that means going forward. So the way our instruments work is soil moisture tension. The lower the number is the wetter the soil, and the higher the number, the drier the soil. So in this event, we start with a low number. If you pay attention to the dot here down next to the 0 on the gauge, as the soil dries out, that number will start to climb, and it will literally go off the rails just like that. But it will start to climb, it'll get higher. So you'll see that number. Think of this principle. If you go to the gym and you take a 5-pound dumbbell and you curl it, for most people, it's not too difficult. There's not a whole lot of stress on the body. But if you take a 50-pound dumbbell, then it's a lot more stress. It's a lot harder. The same principle here. The lower the number, drier or wetter the soil, higher the number, drier the soil. So the other illustration is once I get my irrigation on, I start with the high number here, I irrigate, and my number goes lower. So the interpreting Irrometer data is very, very simple. It's pretty easy to manage too. And like I said, we'll get into that as we keep going deeper. So the basics. So Irrometer is really known for two types of sensors. One is the tensiometer, I'm sure on the left, which I'm sure many of you have seen at some point. And the second is the WATERMARK sensor. That is essentially the electronic equivalent to the tensiometer. I'll give you, we're going to go more in detail here, but those are the two main reading devices that we utilize. So the first one, the tensiometer, is a manually read device. It has a porous ceramic tip down at the bottom, a hollow tube, a pressure gauge to give you your reading, and then you need a service unit to pump out the air from the device. Now, the way this device works is you put liquid inside the instrument, you bore a hole in the ground, you put the instrument in that hole, and then as the soil dries out, like I said, that needle will move on the gauge. So the water, as the soil dries, the water inside the instrument is pulled through that ceramic tip, and that's what moves the actual needle. Now, if the water is being pulled through the ceramic tip and into the soil, that means we're going to have to replace it. So, in layman's terms, this unit requires maintenance. Now, you may be refilling this instrument every week, every 3 weeks. It really just depends on how wet you keep the soil. The more you stress the crop, the more water is going to be taken out of this instrument. Therefore, the more maintenance you need to do on it. These instruments run anywhere between $80 to $100, depending on the length, just to kind of give you an idea. The next is the WATERMARK sensor. So this is, like I said, the electronic equivalent to the tensiometer. It's perfectly accurate in most soils. And when I say most soils, I mean if you have crazy beach sand or you have a lot of rocks, that could be detrimental to the readings on this WATERMARK sensor. We have to, in any case, whether it's a tensiometer or the WATERMARKs, we have to make sure we have good soil contact, because you could have a $10,000 Cadillac system that reads these sensors, but if these sensors aren't installed right, none of it matters, because you got to have good data. So the calibration on it's stable and proven. The sensor's been around for quite a while. As a matter of fact, my competitors use this sensor because they know it's a good sensor and it's very inexpensive. And there's no maintenance required. All the sensor is that little thing you see there with two wires that extend 15 feet long. All you do to install it is you wet it overnight. You throw it in a bucket of water. You put the sensor on PVC, and you just bore a hole and put it in the ground just like you would the tensiometer. So it's very simple, very easy to read. And those sensors are about $42 to the grower. So again, very inexpensive, no maintenance. If you have the soil type, there's more good options than bad, but if you have the right soil type, definitely use the WATERMARK. Plus, the tensiometer only goes from 0 to 100 centibars, so you kind of have not a small range, but you have a smaller range. The WATERMARK is particularly good for vineyards because you can go a lot higher. You can go up to 239, so you can see more stressing occur if that's something you're trying to accomplish. So it's a nice trade-off. It can be read manually, which is that how Red is doing it, Miguel? Mm-hmm. He's yes. Reading it manually? Okay, yeah, so he's reading it just like in this picture here. He takes out the unit, he clips onto the ends of the leads, and he gets a reading. We also have the option to have it remote, and we'll go into that now. But actually, let me discuss something else first. So I wanted to tell you before we go into the data collection options, installation's key, right? I mentioned if they're not installed properly, then it's no good. And I just kind of put this in there to kind of illustrate that these sensors, we would have multiple sensors at multiple depths. And what's key is to have the sensors not only in the root zone, because I want the sensors to experience what the tree or the vine's actually experiencing, but I also want it in the wet zone. So if I don't have my sensor in a combination of the wet zone and the root zone, then there's no point in putting it in there because you're not getting viable data. So just one thing to remember, I typically put them in a straight line. I'll show you a picture coming up. And I usually start about, maybe about a foot away from the vine so that I make sure I'm in that zone. And like I said, this will make a little bit more sense as we get further down. So I mentioned data collection options. We have a wide range. Our first one, this is kind of our most popular, or it was our most popular for a long time. It's the WATERMARK monitor. It's a manual version, so you have to essentially go out and collect the data manually yourself. It has 8 sensor inputs. It can do soil moisture, it could do air temperature, it could do soil temperature, a rain gauge, and also a pressure switch to record your irrigation events. So you can do up to 8 sensors, any combination you want. Really nice little unit. The little display on there, you can come out, push that green button, and you can get the readings on the display, or you can actually manually download it with the computer. So the sensor wires are, of course, wired in directly. The user programs the data, so meaning the grower programs the data collection frequency. You can get readings every hour, every 2 hours, every 4 hours, really whatever you want, whatever you're looking for. And it will store those records. And like I said, you can come out and download them and have them on your computer. It's powered by 9-volt battery, so there's no external power needed. It's real simple. It's a box about the size of a football, I would say, or a shoe box maybe. And it's really, really simple, easy to install. And like I said, you have to go manually get the data. Now, for those individuals who say, well, you know what, I really like that. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I do have a bigger vineyard, or, even if I have a smaller one, I still want the data. I travel a lot, so I want the data coming to my phone or my computer. Well, we do have that option, and I'm going to show you that next. So I mentioned to you that the 900M, used to be my most popular item that I sold, but actually it's become the 900M cellular gateway. So there's no difference in terms of the actual logger. You see there's 2 blue boxes there. One of them is the traditional 900M logger, but the second box up top is actually a cellular add-on module that takes the data from this logger and reports the data to your phone or computer every hour. So it's a really, really nice, clean setup. There's so many different ways to do it. I showed this one because it's pretty flexible. There's a couple more I'm going to show you, but that giant flexible conduit going into the greenhouse, that actually has all the wires that are connecting to the sensors that are with the crop, where the data logger is on the outside collecting the power from the solar panel. So again, you can access this data on your phone, tablet, computer. You get a reading every hour. The cool thing about this thing is the yearly subscription is $120 per station a year. Very inexpensive. Sorry, Miguel, I don't know if I could talk about price, but it's just, okay, all right, good. So yeah.
No, you talk about everything that you find important, and people are gonna ask questions about the price. So okay. You do your thing, and then when people have questions, and by the way, folks, feel free to start typing your questions for Jacob. And at the end of his presentation, we'll have a couple minutes for questions. But no, Jacob, please do whatever you want to do. It's fine.
Perfect. So yeah, like I said, the yearly subscription is $120 per station. Again, station holds 8 sensors, all that information. The system itself costs about $1,300. So it's in between $1,300 and $1,400 for everything. So you pay for the station, you own it, and the only recurring is $120 a year. Very, very reasonable to get that information. We have warranty programs, free 1-year warranty, but the reality is if something does happen, we generally help out and come out and fix. Actually, it would be me. We don't really fuss on warranty times unless it's 10 years or something like that. But there we go. So here's another example. I mentioned to you earlier, I want the sensors in the wet zone and the root zone. So you can see here, we got a little micro sprinkler here to the right. We have our 3 sensors. Those pipes going down all have sensors attached to them. All the wires are protected in junction boxes and conduit going back up to the unit. So it's very clean, protects against rodents, protects against tractor blight, protects against anything that might happen out there. But this is a real nice clean setup on some almonds. Basically, you could do the same exact thing on a vineyard. Just make sure that panel is getting sun and it's oriented south. For the most part, this has been a real success for me in terms of the installation. And then here, just a little bit closer look, you can see I have those sensors fairly close to the line, in line, like I said, and I have them about a foot away from the tree, starting with the shallow sensor and working my way out to the deeper sensor. In this case, I have a 1-foot sensor, a 2-foot, and a 3-foot. And like I said, all that information is being collected hourly. Okay, now, I've showed you the products, I showed you kind of what we offer, but I want to show you just really quickly what's really important, why this information, and Red kind of talked about it earlier, and it was pretty interesting what he's doing. But this is exactly, this is the reason why you implement soil moisture in your vineyard. So this is information from a grower. It's just a sample, but it's information who we put some sensors out there and we asked the grower, we said, look, just irrigate the way you normally do. Don't change anything. We just want to see what's going on. So the red line represents a 1 foot sensor, which would see water before the green line, which represents a 2 foot sensor. So red, 1 foot, green, 2 foot. We see a 12-hour irrigation here, which can be captured by the pressure switch. We have that sensor as well. But we see the 12-hour irrigation and we see the 1 foot sensor get water, but the 2 foot sensor really never gets anything. Now it's not really getting much drier, but it's really not getting wetter either. So we would classify this irrigation as too short. So we showed the grower this after he did his normal practice, and he said, well, okay, well, let's up it. So he decided to up it to 16 hours. Well, this in our estimation is a little bit too long. Well, not even in our estimation, just in the information our sensors are giving. So this is a 16-hour irrigation. You can see about midway through, the 1 foot sensor gets fully saturated, goes down to 0. You can see, remember, lower number, wetter the soil. And then about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through, 4/5 of the way through, you see that 2 foot sensor finally get wet. But you also see some of this blue vertical line a little bit past that green sensor line. That means we over irrigated. We probably could have cut the irrigation just a bit. So knowing that 12 hours is just a little too short and 16 hours is just a little too long, we went to 14. And 14, for this grower in particular, seemed to be just right. So we get the adequate moisture down to 1 foot, and then we look at the 2 foot. And even though it doesn't go all the way down to 0, which, by the way, you don't have to. You don't have to be fully saturated at every level all the time. That's not always the goal we're looking for. But the 2 foot, in this case, actually finally gets some water, and it's an adequate amount. And we kind of figure out, okay, the grower, in this case, he was actually underwatering. So in other cases, as Red said, he was overwatering. So having this information, again, just is really, really valuable when you're trying to figure out, what that sweet spot is for your irrigation. And then really quickly, I normally would go online and actually show what this looks like online and kind of mess with it. But this is the online profile or the online portal, I should say, for the 900M cellular gateway. It's very simple. Up at the top left, you have all your locations in your field. So if you had multiple units, they're all listed there. The 2 little squiggly lines, you press that button, it brings up these gauges here on the right. It brings up the graph down at the bottom, which is your long term. The gauges are really cool because it gives you blue, green, and red. And these numbers are set up by you. And we can give you a baseline and kind of tell you, hey, this is the kind of general numbers you want. You want to irrigate at this number. You consider this number really, really wet. The gauges all can be changed. And like I said, they really need to be changed by you as you start using this product going down the line. But the gauges, again, are a snapshot. This is what's happening right now. And that graph down there is what's showing you over time. You can look at a month, a week, a day, a year. You can look at all the trends you want to look at down there. And like I said, it's all with the simple press of the button. The green thumbs up means that all the sensors are really wet, or they're in the blue or the green. The red thumbs down means that at least one of your sensors are dry. And if you have an irrigation switch attached to the system, you'll see a little water drop and it will tell you before you even look at the data that you're irrigating on that block or that field or whatever the case may be. So again, this system is really designed to be very simple for the most computer illiterate person to the most computer savvy person. We want to make it simple, and that's the key to our product, and that's why we've been having some really, really good success with this thing. So that's all I have for you. I want to thank you, and I'll go ahead and stop right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. That was very informative. We do have a couple questions for you, folks. Please, any questions that you have for Jacob, type them in. Somebody's asking, what is the difference between wet zone and root zone? You were talking about putting the probes in the wet zone and the root zone. Somebody would like a little clarification on that.
Yeah, so depending on what kind of irrigation you have, I mean, I'm assuming it's probably drip. Would that be safe to assume?
Well, here in Napa it is, but we might have folks from all over the county, all over the state, or even other parts of the country. I'm not sure. So feel free to generalize.
Okay. So the wet zone, just in general, is wherever that water pattern is in your field. So if you have a micro sprinkler, if you have drip, when you see that turn on, and you see what the wetted area is on the soil. You can clearly see, the marking from the water on the top of the soil. You want the sensor right in that zone. And then of course, when I say the root zone of the actual crop, because again, those two are absolutely needed. If I put it in the root zone, but don't put it where there's an emitter, then what's going to happen is I'm not going to see that water hit the sensor, and everything's going to look dry all the time. And that's not something I want either. So again, combination of root zone and wet zone is really what we're after.
Okay, good. And then somebody's asking, what are the maintenance fees for these units?
Well, the idea for the Irrometer, the 900M, is for you to buy it and have it installed, or install it yourself. Either way is fine. And the real maintenance only is there's a 12-volt battery and a 9-volt battery in the units respectively, and those every couple of years need to be replaced. The solar panel may need to be cleaned from bird debris or whatever else may come across it. But as far as maintenance, it's really designed to be maintenance free, to walk away. Even as far as the sensors too, like I mentioned, the watermarks don't need to be maintained. They're just left in the ground. You don't have to worry about them freezing or whatever the case may be, but maintenance free for the most part.
And for anybody that is more curious about this technology or any of the other ones that the speakers are going to talk about, like I said, we have them in our vineyard. So if you want to see them out front, installed, working, feel free to send me an email and you can come over and take a look at them. And so that way you can see them work or not work. So for Irrometer, we have a couple of them installed. So we have the ones that Jacob talked about. We have the tensiometer, which is the lowest tech, no batteries, no solar, no anything. But it doesn't record the data. You have to go write it down and sort of keep control of that. Then the second level that we also have installed in our vineyard would be the ones that Red mentioned, which are, you have the probes, but then you have the cables, and then you have to go with an instrument connected to the cables, and that will give you the number, but nothing is being recorded. So you still have to write it down, walk it over, take note of it. And then the third level that also we have from Irrometer would be the 900M, which is the little blue box, which is essentially a data logger. The probes are installed to the box, like Jacob mentioned, and then this box is collecting the data. And I think depending, you can change it how often you want it to collect the data, but I have it set up to twice a day, so every 12 hours. And if I do it like that, I have years of free space in there. I could go several years without removing the data. And then when I go and remove the data, put them on my computer, then everything erases and starts again. And then you can change it to anything, right, Jacob? It's at like down to every hour or something like that. You can do it so that it's good.
Yeah, you could do half hour, 2 hours.
Yeah.
It all depends. Like you said, you do it twice a day. So you would hold several years worth. I typically do it at 4 hours. I take a reading every 4 hours, and that holds about 2 years worth of data. If I did it every 2 hours, it would hold 1 year, and so on and so forth. But having that manual option's been good. And if you have an existing manual 900M, you always can retrofit the cellular module to it too, to take some of that cost out of it. If you already have that unit and it's working fine, you can do that. But one more thing I wanted to say. I'm sorry, Miguel.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
Whether you use the manual version like Red is doing, or you have a cellular version, the cellular version specifically is not. Don't let it take you out of the field. It's critical for you to be in the field. You need to be there. The cellular version is nice to have because it gives you the information on a whim. All the information is in the palm of your hand at any time you want. But do not let it be a crutch for not going out to that field, because that's absolutely important.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I will resonate on that as well. You guys are very busy, and sometimes you have to rely on either your employees or you yourself don't have the time to do it. But it's very important, especially because these are instruments, and as high quality as they are, there might be issues here and there that you have to be aware of. If you're just collecting the data and not even processing it, it's not going to do you any good. If you're walking it, you get to learn what these instruments look like when they're working, when there's something odd. The battery might go off and you don't know. So it's very important. A bird might have gone crazy on it. You never know. So it's important to keep an eye on them. We have another question, Jacob. Somebody's asking, how much would it cost to go from the 900M to the cellular version?
So if you have the 900M and you just want to add the cellular module, the cellular component is $789. And that could just, like I said, it could be wired to the logger and you're off and running. That includes, the $789 includes a solar panel, the second box with the cell gateway, the 12-volt battery, the charge controller, and then there's the $120 service fee, so or cellular fee. So you pay the $120 up front with that. So what is that? You're looking at around $900 to upgrade it fully and with a year of service.
And one thing to make notice as well is that these boxes or these units have to be strategically placed in the vineyard. You don't have to put them on every single vine. That would be millions of dollars. You put them in strategically, and the way, and Jacob, please let me know if you disagree with me. But the way that I install them is we try to strategize based on the soil type. If you have very similar soil type, then you can have one unit representing sort of that area. If you have very different soil types, you definitely want to have different boxes. So these prices are per unit. And then you're going to have different units. We're going to hear from another grower in a few minutes. And she's working with several vineyards, several hundreds of acres. So sometimes for maybe 100 acres, we may have 4 or 5, depending on the soil type. And in the case of vineyards, because you have different varieties and you have different irrigation blocks, it would be important to consider installing at least one unit on each irrigation block. And these boxes, the 900M that Jacob was mentioning, I've installed lots and lots of them, so I'm very comfortable with them. So you have 8 ports, so that you can have soil moisture probes, but you can also add temperature. And what is the other one, Jacob? Is it the pressure gauge or the?
Yeah, you could do the pressure to
Yeah.
record irrigation. You could do a rain gauge and also a air temperature and soil temperature.
There you go. So with this unit, you can install not only the soil moisture probe, but you can get a little bit more information as far as your irrigation and also some of the weather information. So now when you have that box, the way that I have done it in some cases, and this is doable, and please correct me if you disagree, Jacob. I think I've been working with it so long that I like messing with them a little bit. But in some cases, in one row, you might have a big slope, right? So the top of your slope versus the bottom of your slope, you're going to have differences in irrigation. The way that the water will move, it's going to be different than the top of the bottom. Your irrigation might work a little harder to get higher the slope. So what I've done sometimes is I put the box right in the middle, but then I run the cables up and down. And the cables that the company provides go up to 15 feet. And I've done my own Frankenstein with it. And I actually just buy copper cable and I extend them more. So I have extended them up to 500 feet and they still work great. The signal, I didn't know if it was going to work because he uses one of those square batteries, but it works great. So if you have, as long as it's within the same row so that the cables are tied within the line and they're not exposed to the tractors or anything else, as long as you have a good design, you can always have them. I've done it up to 500 feet. And the reason I like doing that is because you have 8 ports, so you can have 3 soil moisture probes and you can have a temperature probe. So that would be one unit or one section. And then you can use the other 4 ports to do another 3 probes and another temperature sensor. But you don't want to do them right next to each other. Otherwise you're just doing a little bit being a little redundant there. So I have done that and it works really well. So when you are looking at the costs, I'm always available. Jacob is always available if you want to talk to us about it. But I have installed quite a few of them and I do like them. Every company that I invited today, I've had work with them and I like the technology, which is why I invited them. But they sort of represent different angles of the same goal that we all have here. So feel free to reach out to us if you need that. Let's see here. Somebody, we have Leticia, forgive me if I pronounce that wrong, but she's saying my probe at 36 always reads dried on number 3 and 239 on port 6 and 7 and 8 always say dry. Do you think there is something wrong with probes? I have only pressed green button, never downloaded data, but it doesn't matter if I irrigate for 40 hours always reads the same. Leticia, this seems to be a little bit complex for the sake of timekeeping. Why don't you send me an email? Or Jacob as well, and we can help you. Jacob can help you. In some cases, like the issue that we have with Red, his lowest probe was always showing dry. Didn't matter what, how much he was irrigating, even if it rained heavily. So in some cases, if you have a hard clay pan, when we're installing them, we look for those things. So you definitely don't want to probe right at the hard pan because the water is not going to penetrate. But also, sometimes things go wrong, you know, with the installation, or things get old over time. But we're here to help. Jacob, anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, no. If it says the word dry, and it sounds like that's what it is. It sounds like you have a 900M, the box we're talking about. If it says the word dry, then that means the sensor typically is not connected, which I'm sure the sensor is physically connected, which means that either the sensor has gone bad or the wires somewhere along the line have been cut.
Another thing that I have seen, Jacob, when you connect the cables, they're really close to each other. And if for any reason they touch, that creates a short circuit, so they won't communicate. So the first thing that I recommend is making sure that the cables are connected properly and that they're not touching each other.
Yes, no, that's absolutely right. Like I said, the dry code indicates a problem. 239 is, even though it's very, very high, it's the last legitimate reading that the WATERMARK sensor will provide. So 239 just means that, yeah, it's really that dry. 240, like Miguel just mentioned, is the actual short code. On the box, it will say short. On the online profile, it will say 240. So just little things. Also, Miguel, just so you know, I put some like minute videos on LinkedIn. So if anybody is interested, I'd really appreciate, you know, if you want to, you know, follow or whatever, or I can connect with you. I put little weekly videos out on little tips and tricks that you can use for installing and troubleshooting these systems. So if you ever get a chance, go on there and take a look.
All right. It looks like we don't have any more questions. Jacob, thank you so much for your time. Was your contact information on your slide?
You know what? No, but
if you go ahead to the chat box, can you please type in your contact information so that everybody has it?
Of course. Let's see.
And you guys can always reach back to me if you need to get in contact with Jacob. I can always share his contact information with you, but are you able to see the message, the chat box, Jacob?
Yeah, let me do this real quick.
Okay.
I just put my name. Hold on. Okay.
That's fine, so people know who's typing in.
Let's see here.
So I'll let you do that, Jacob. Why don't you go ahead and please mute your mic. Oh, there he goes. So that's his cell phone number. Please give us your email address as well, just in case somebody wants to send you an email. And please, just whenever you get a chance, just mute your mic. And then if you want to turn off your camera, that would be great as well.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you again for the opportunity, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Jacob. Appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and take a small break, folks. Give you a chance to stretch. Please come back. We're going to keep hearing from people from industry. So if you don't have the agenda, we're going to hear from Thule. We're going to hear from Ranch Systems, and we're going to hear from Vintel in a couple minutes. And we're also going to hear from Adriana Goldi, who is Vineyard Manager for Markham, talking about her experience with using these probes with multiple vineyards. So please go ahead and take, let's go ahead and take 10 minutes. So let's come back at 9:10. All right, I'll see you guys soon. I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic and turn off my camera. See you guys soon. It looks like we have everybody back. It's with a lot of pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Adrienne Ubaldi, you mind? There you are. It's a little shiny. And your mic, there you go. I've had the pleasure to work with Adrienne over, there you are. I've had the pleasure to work with Adrienne for several months now, almost a year, I think. And just like Red, Adrienne is a participant of our program where Mark can receive some funding to buy soil moisture probes, and they decided to invest a little bit more money on that as well. So far, we're working with 3 of their vineyards, and there's several acres involved. So Adrienne would be the opposite example of what Red described to us. Red came to represent the small grower, and Red is, Adrienne is going to represent more of a bigger operation. So Adrienne, I will let you introduce yourself. If you just want to say anything about yourself, your operation, how many acres, types of what's all grapes, but maybe the varieties that you have. What can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Miguel. Like Miguel said, I'm a vineyard manager for Markham Vineyards. We have over 300 acres throughout Napa Valley, primarily Merlot, Cabernet, with also some Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. With the grant funding, we were able to purchase 15 of the sensors. And like he said, we added in a little more money. But we have 15 sensors across over 250 acres on our 3 ranches that we've been using.
That's 15 units. Sorry to correct you, Adrienne. That's 15 units. And then we have multiply that times a couple. So we have several actual probes in the ground, but it's 15 of those. Actually, she has the 900M boxes that Jacob was mentioning.
Yeah, and each of those units have 3 sensors, or most of them have 3 sensors with it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. So Adrienne, can you tell us a little bit about your experience so far with these probes? What's working, what's not working? What's your experience so far?
Yeah, I've used these in the past at other companies I've worked for, and I had never felt that they were calibrated or worked correctly to what we were trying to do. When you look on them, a 50 is different in every situation and every type of soil. What I appreciate about what Miguel has done with this is he's taken the time to actually calibrate the soil for each location these are at. One of our ranches, it's only 60 acres and there's a lot of different types of soils. And because of that, we have 6 different units across just 60 acres. He was able to go through and calibrate it so that, on one end of the ranch, 50 might mean that it's still 85% moisture. On the other end of the ranch, a 50 means that we're in deficit irrigation and the vine has no moisture. So with that information, I'm able to pinpoint and use precision farming in order to irrigate a lot better.
That's a really good point. I don't think that Jacob and I mentioned that before, but when you install these probes, the Irrometer company gives you a nice guide as far as what to expect, what the numbers mean. This is measuring tension, but I've seen some differences on what the numbers mean between soil types. And the company does give you a cheat sheet of what to expect, if it's a sandy soil, if it's a loam, or if it's a clay soil. But what I like to do is take it a step farther and actually calibrate it directly to the specific soil where the probes were installed. And in some cases that matches what the company is saying. In some other cases, it might vary just a little bit. I just like doing that just so that we get a pretty good indication of what is happening within that soil. That's a good point, Adrienne. Thank you. We do have had some challenges. I'm not sure how much you want to share, but there's been a few instances where we have some challenges. So what has been the most challenging for you, Adrienne?
I think the challenging part right now, as of any technology, is just fine-tuning it for what you need it for. You can't just throw money at a problem and expect it to be fixed immediately. It takes a couple years, especially with technology on a seasonal crop. The biggest issue I'm having right now, and it's being remedied right now, is that where the sensors were set up in the ground, the drip emitter isn't getting all the way there. On some of our soils, they're extremely sandy. So when we do irrigate, the water just funnels straight down and doesn't spread out at all. And it's not hitting the sensors. So on soils that we have been irrigating, the sensors are showing that it's completely dry, which isn't true because the vines are still growing and very healthy. So we've since, or Miguel has since gone out and moved a couple of the emitter locations to be able to capture what's actually being irrigated.
And that is very important, and Jacob mentioned it. When we install these probes, we want to make sure that we install them where the water is gonna go. And if I was the one installing them, so this was my a little bit of my fault. But when we install these emitters, we expect that they will be installed where the water comes. So a couple things to keep in mind is that you need to make sure that it's right under the emitter, first of all, or if you have a micro sprinkler or a sprinkler system, make sure that the probes are where the water is gonna be penetrating the soil. But also it is very important that you make sure that that emitter where the probe is installed is not plugged. Because remember, we're doing this in a representational basis. So Adrian mentioned 60 acres, 66 stations. So each of those stations essentially is representing more or less 10 acres. So if the emitter right on top of the probe is not working properly, it's gonna give you false representation. So that's where the irrigation evaluations come in very handy. We have done some, actually, no, we haven't done any for Adrian yet, but we will be doing that because if you have these instruments installed, you need to make sure that you know that your irrigation system is working properly. Otherwise, if it's uneven, if some areas receive more water than other ones because your irrigation system is not efficient, then it's going to give you false information. So that's important. Also, Adrian mentioned, it's a little bit of a learning curve in trying to determine what works for you. One of the things that we're doing with Adrian is that, first of all, she does have some other ways to measure water stress because she currently is working with Vintel, which is going to be another speaker, and they measure or they estimate water stress. So if you only have the soil moisture probes, what I have tried to work with Adrienne is to try to figure out what the vine's like, because first of all, there's soil differences in which we are addressing. And then second of all, different varieties may have different water needs. We're fortunate that there's a lot of research going on to drought tolerant plants, not only for grapes, but for any other crops. So depending on which rootstock you have or which variety you have, there might be differences. Even though it's all grapes, it might be differences in all of that. So what Adrienne is working on is on trying to figure out what the vine's like. Once we get the probes working properly, we make sure that everything is reliable, and we're trying to figure out what the vine's like. Ideally, we would like to use some sort of instrument, and I think that Adrienne had or will also try the Thule system, the Thule Vision, which we're going to hear about them as well. So that way you get an indication of what the vine's like as far as water stress. And we'll talk about this during the Wednesday workshop. If you were not present, feel free to look at the video so that you can understand what I'm talking about. But with the soil moisture probes, that's one piece of the puzzle. Then you want to understand how much of that water it's actually benefiting your plants. So thank you for sharing that, Adrienne. So you have multiple properties. You have multiple boxes, and the boxes that Adrienne have are not connected to the web. Those are the data loggers where the data is being collected every 12 hours. I think we have set it up for her. But she has to go and manually retrieve that information and put it on a laptop in order to look at the numbers. And then there's a software where you can look at all those numbers. How has that experience been for you, Adrienne, having so many acres?
It's been good. Yeah, I'm across all of our acreage multiple times a week, so it hasn't been difficult to get. Now that I've seen almost a full growing season with them, I think I can kind of make some determinations on where they can stay in the future and where I'd like to move them a little bit, and then potentially put on the transmitter so that I could get it remotely. You know, there's on that one ranch in particular where there's 6 different boxes. 3 of them have read fairly consistent throughout the year, and the other ones haven't. So, you know, the other ones I might leave manual and then combine the other 3 to read electronically so that it's not a constant, you know, I don't have to go out there and read it all the time. But the actual reading of it takes 30 seconds a box. It's pretty easy.
And we have them pretty much in the middle of the row. So she has to walk all the way to the middle of the row. I've done it myself. I install them and I help her with maintenance as well. It's not that bad. I mean, it's a pleasant walk as well, depending if they haven't tilled yet and it's easy to walk, things like that. But it's important to notice that she's walking all of these boxes. So we have, what do we say, 15, 16 boxes, I think? I forgot. So she walks through every single one of them, but you don't walk them every day. And you don't walk all of them on the same day. So what is your strategy? How do you break it down?
It kind of depends on where my week lands, honestly. I try to hit now seeing how the soils have reacted, I try to hit the ones where the soils drain more often than the ones, further North Valley that tend to hold water a little bit better. We also have more sensitive varieties in the southern part of Napa. So I want to watch those a little more carefully, especially now that we're through lag getting into veraison, so that I don't stress those out too much now, given the time frame. But as a whole, I try to hit them early week so that then I can talk to the vineyard management company and get irrigation on, depending on what the weather ahead is looking like.
Good. And one thing to point out is that we just began working with these sensors this season. So one of the things that we're working on is, first of all, is fine tune all of these little details, make sure that the emitter is actually hitting the right spot so that the probes are measuring correctly. There's a little bit of a learning curve as far as learning what the numbers mean. And so right now, I am not recommending for Adrienne to use the probes entirely for her decision-making process. Right now, we are learning, we're fine-tuning everything. So the first year, the first season, it's sort of like a learning opportunity. And then by the end of this season, she'll be an expert. And then by next season, she'll be able to utilize this to its full potential. At the same time, she has the Vintel data where it's showing her some of the water stress. And we're comparing both of them to see how they communicate with each other. So there's a lot of learning that is happening this season. And then by next season, she'll be ready to run with it. But it's important to notice that it takes a little bit of time to make sure that things are working fine. But once things work, they will work for a very long time. This, my opinion is that they're very high quality. They work really well. And once you fine tune everything, which just it takes a little bit of time, then everything is totally fine. You mentioned, Adrienne, that you might consider connecting these boxes remotely. So now that you have had a chance to work with them. So when we started working with the program, we provide you with some funding and the decision was yours. The decision was yours as far as what you wanted to buy. And almost everybody that I work with decides to go with just taking a little bit of caution, not invest all your money with higher price, high technology, by kind of like compromise, get a little bit lower technology, but install them in more parts of the vineyard. So do you feel like it's working enough for you that you actually will consider joining, putting everything remotely? Or do you wish that from the beginning it would have been enough? I guess, let me put it this way. If money wouldn't been an issue, would have you gone completely remotely at the beginning, or would you still wanted to be cautious about it?
I think I still would have been cautious about it. By having them out in the vineyard, it does make me get out there weekly, walk the field, look at it, compare it to what Vintel is saying, compare it to what the soil moisture is saying, and also put my thoughts behind it as well. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, which is why I am utilizing leaf water potentials and Vintel and the soil moisture, and then bouncing it off the vineyard management company as well in terms of recommendations.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always good to diversify. If you get different sources of information that would allow you to make irrigation decisions, it's better than putting everything in one basket, like you said, Adrienne. That's definitely a really good point. I still have a few more questions for Adrienne, but if anybody from the audience would like to ask her questions, please feel free to start typing them on the chat box. something that I really would like you to share with everybody, Adrian, is your experience with Calistoga, your ranch in Calistoga. That's coming very interesting. I don't want to say too much. Share with us as much as you would like to share with us about your experience with Calistoga and the moisture probes.
Yeah, our Calistoga property is right at the beginning of the river. And historically, it has been irrigated quite frequently because the soil up there tends to harden and create a crust in the first 6 or 8 inches. And you can't disc it after a certain point because it becomes like asphalt. You can't get a shovel through it. So what we've been taught is that means the soil is dry. What we have found extremely interesting now that we have the soil moisture probes in is that even 2 feet down, once you break that crust, the soil is reading between 85–90% moisture still. I checked a couple of them the other day and it was still showing that it's very wet down below. And because of that, we haven't irrigated at all at that ranch. And there's some vines that you can tell probably needed a little more water, but as a whole, that vineyard looks like it could be potentially dry farmed, which is a huge savings to us, both water and energy moving forward if these probes are telling us what we now know might be true and that the water table is higher than we thought there.
So do you feel confident enough that what the probes are telling you reflects on how the vines look?
Yes, I do. Last year, across all of our ranches, I did pressure bomb readings and then also used Vintel on some select blocks. And Vintel all year at that ranch said, don't water, don't water, don't water. And so on the few blocks that we used their model, we didn't water and everything was fine. The rest of the ranch, we watered as normal. And now we are finding this year that once I've expanded the Vintel block, that it's still saying don't water, and the soil moisture probes are backing that up.
So far, the main source of water for that vineyard has been the rains that we received. Other than that, I think you have maybe irrigated a couple times, but other than that, there has been no irrigation, correct?
Correct.
Would you be able to estimate how many times you would have irrigated, or how many times would have historically in years past this vineyard would have been irrigated, just to get a sense of how much water has been saved?
Weekly.
Up to now. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a huge water saving, and not every vineyard it's a good candidate for dry farming, but we're very positive that this might be one of those vineyards that might be a good candidate for dry farming. The water table is quite high. So it's very rocky as well. So it is definitely going to look very nice for a dry farming operation. And without the soil moisture probes, we wouldn't have known, because when you go there, and I have walked around myself and dig around, you can go maybe a foot and it's completely dry. It's bone dry. But you go below that and it starts getting really, really wet. And that's because of the high water table and just the capacity of the soil to hold the water. So in that case, without the soil moisture probes, if you were only using the pressure bomb and Vintel, you would sort of like getting a sense that your vines were fine. But would you agree with me, Adrian, if I say that maybe you would have gotten maybe a little bit more nervous if you're just looking at Vintel and just looking at the pressure bomb without knowing exactly how much moisture is in the soil? Do you think that's giving you a little bit of peace of mind?
Yes, I would agree to that. I think on that site, you installed them mid-May, I believe, which was after our last rain event. And the top 6–8 inches of that soil was hard as a rock. And I was there when Miguel dug it, and not 18 inches down, 2 feet down, the ground was still wet enough to combine it into a ball, which was extremely surprising based on the history of that ranch and how hard the soil was the top 8 inches.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how comfortable you feel with sharing a little bit more, but you communicate with your management company, right? And at some point you mentioned to me that they were getting a little bit nervous. So how has that experience been with you working with a management company that has worked on that vineyard for a long time and has liked to irrigate it constantly. Have they really pushed back? How do you feel about that interaction with them? If you feel comfortable sharing with us.
Yeah, I think they were a little nervous. I believe they are still a little nervous, but now, like I said earlier, now that we are in lag and getting closer to veraison, you know, I'm more comfortable allowing more water to be put on the vines. You know, we're through that point of stress where lack of water is going to help improve quality, and now it's just about maintaining canopies and making sure they can make it through summer to get to harvest.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good point, that a lot of you guys might be the one turning on the valves, or in a lot of the cases you rely on a management company or a team in order to make those decisions. So it's very important to communicate with them, and we are always open to communicate with your team as well if you want to learn how these instruments work. Ultimately, whoever's making the decision should have the last word, but if these companies, they always act, in my opinion, with the best intentions. You know, they want you to have the best operation. And I work with a lot of vineyard management companies, and they're great. But some of them, it's just like anything else. Some of them they have their own way of doing things, and some of them don't like doing it with technology. Some of them like doing it by visual inspection, which it's great. They are trained to do that. But ultimately, if we have more eyes, more technology on it, you can make better decisions. So I'm always a proponent of just having round-out communications, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But every now and then, you might encounter a stubborn employee or a stubborn team member that say, no, I don't want to do that. It's bogus or whatever. So communicating and just letting them know how these instruments work and that they are reliable, it's very important. To me here, the takeaway with Adrienne is that she, and please correct me if I say anything that is not true, Adrienne, but I think that she feels confident that what she's seeing on the vines reflects more or less, at least for this branch in Calistoga, she's seeing that there's enough moisture according to the probes, but she's also seeing that the vines are looking pretty much, it matches what the moisture is saying. Now, we had a couple issues before where what the probes were saying was not reflecting on the vine. So that's how we determined that we needed to make a little bit adjustments on those installations, because the pros were saying that it was completely dry, but the vines were completely happy. So that definitely is a disconnect. That's why I said this year it's learning, it's adapting, it's modifying, it's making sure that everything is working fine, so that next year she can utilize that on her decision making, even though she's already doing that in Calistoga, because she feels confident that it's working. So everybody learns at a different pace, things go at a different pace. So it's as long as you feel comfortable, you can go with it. I don't think that, Adrienne, you're making too many drastic irrigation decisions yet on any of your other vineyards, correct?
No.
Yeah, so it's still learning, and she's pairing it up with other technology just to make sure that things actually correlate and make sense. Anything else that you would like to share with us, Adrienne? How likely are you to recommend people to work with either the RCD or with other agencies in assistance with probes like this? How likely are you to recommend folks to install such instruments?
I would highly recommend it. You know, I don't want to even pretend like I'm an expert in this. So if we can use our local resources to help in things like this, it's, you know, the more people out there, the better. I wouldn't have been able to do this without the grant funding and assistance from Miguel, and it's proven, especially in Calistoga, to be quite valuable.
I think you guys are running with it. The initial funding was just enough for you to buy the instruments and try them out in certain sections of your vineyard, and you guys decided to invest more money on it, and hopefully in the future you guys decide to do even more than that. And we're working really hard to provide more funding for folks to do it. And the bottom line is that the grower needs to feel comfortable. So that's why we decided to provide this funding. I wish I could provide it for everybody. Trust me, if I would have $1 million that I could give out to people, I would. To everybody, I will buy you guys all the instruments, because one thing is for me to talk about it, and another thing is for you to try it. So this program, the idea was to give you the opportunity to have these probes, quote unquote, risk-free, because that way you can try them, you can test them, and then after that, you can decide if it makes sense for you to invest more money on it or not. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to offer that a little bit more. But if anybody wants to try them and you want to do the investment, I'm more than available to assist you and guide you on what needs to be done. We have one question here. As Jana Olson would like us to share which adjustments were required in the year you found the probe was reading inaccurately. Love learning from this case study. So I already mentioned that. Essentially what was happening is that the moisture probes were indicating that the soil was 100% dry. Same case that happened with red. With red, the probe was broken because it was not showing, for red, it was showing a consistent number. The number was not changing. So that told me that the probe was broken. In the case of Adrian, we say the numbers change a little bit, but it still shows dry. So the fact that the numbers are changing tells me that the probes are working. It's just that they're not being wetted. So what happened with Adrian is that we decided to look, and we found out that the way that the emitter was placed was not hitting directly where the probes were. So where you install the probe, right on top of that, you want to make sure that the drip is going and that the emitter is actually working properly. So all we did was to move move the emitter closer in the direction so that it goes directly down. We're still making observations. We're still making changes, but that's one of the things that we did to address that issue. Let's see here.
Miguel mentioned too, I'm also not just focusing on one thing. You know, last year I used Ventel and the pressure bombs and saw that that lined up and their model worked for our vineyards in the parameters I had entered. So I stepped away from doing pressure bombs this year because the model showed it accurately. And this year I'm combining it using the soil moisture and Ventel. And those actually lined up fairly accurately until the soil dried out more than which, you know, and then we had the issue with the emitter not hitting the probe. So there was a point in which one technology was a little more precise or a little better than the other, but it's a learning curve. You know, I had issues with Ventel last year that have been improved this year, and I'm, you know, the little issues with the probes this year will be remedied by next year.
Yeah, I think all of these companies, it's a learning curve, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So it's just a matter of working with the grower, well, for myself to work with the grower, for the grower to work with whoever is assisting them, whether it's a representative from the company, an RCD representative, cooperative extension, whoever is helping you. It's important to keep a communication. Somebody's asking us, Adrian, about what is the best place to place the probes. So when Adrian and I started talking, she shared a lot of maps with me, and then I did a little bit of digging as far as the soil texture in the property, and together we decided where was the best place to install the probes. So first of all, as we have mentioned, the probes, the best place for the probes is right under the emitter. Where the water is, that's where you want to have the probe, because you want to represent. And then you want to have the 3 depths that I and Jacob have talked about. And then as far as where in the vineyard, usually we like to look for, I mean, ideally, you would want to have one of these stations on each irrigation block. That would be the absolute best, but it's not always possible due to economic constraints. So what Adrian and I did, we talked with each other and we decided where were the best strategic places to put it, sort of to represent the entire area. One way to look at it is by soil type. If there's very drastic different soil types in your property, of course, do that. With Adrian, we decided that from one end of a road to the other one was very different. So we installed a box and then we ran cables to each end of the row, even though there were not necessarily topographic differences. It was more of like a soil type. But in the end, I think that we decided to put them on areas that Adrian found important, you know? So if there's areas that you are struggling with vigor, that's one place that you would want to put them. If there's other issues that you would like to address, those are the right places. But in the end, you know your property better than I do. and better than anybody else that is going to help you. So together, I think we can figure things out. So for you, Adrian, do you feel, so for the 3 vineyards that we have been working on, do you feel that you would like more stations? Do you feel that the ones that you have give you enough information? How's it working for you?
I think the ones that we have provided enough information. You know, I basically have one for every 10 acres, and each of my irrigation sets is between 5 and 8 acres. So I could add more, but then it becomes how much more and what's overkill in it. And you know, back to the question earlier, where to place, I think it also depends on what your goal in that farming is. If you're farming very, very high end and you have the ability to irrigate in 2 or 3 acre sets, and you have clients who are fairly demanding on what the end product is, you know, that's gonna demand more technology and attention than if you're farming flatland Chardonnay that's for production.
Yep, exactly. And it's just keeping communication. Like I said, you guys know your field better than I do. So in some cases, I make a recommendation and they tell me, you know what, that doesn't really make sense. What about this? And I'm always open to changing things. But I'm glad to hear that you feel, Adrian, that things are working for you. I only have 1 more minute. Any last thoughts, Adrian, that you would like to share with everybody, or last minute questions, people? Okay, it looks like we are done with this section. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you. We'll continue working together. And if, as always, if there's anything else that we can do for you, please let us know. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please go ahead and mute your microphone and turn off your camera so that you don't embarrass yourself by accident. Thank you so much, Adrian. I appreciate it. Okay. All right, folks. Thank you so much for sticking with us. It looks like we're having a steady audience, about 35 folks, which is a little bit less than on Wednesday, which is okay. Wish we have more people, but it's also a Friday, so I understand. So now we're gonna move on. We're gonna have a representative from Thule, Ernie Wilson. Ernie, if you're here, there you are. Thank you so much. Ernie, is it gonna be just you, or are we gonna have somebody else from your team?
Just me today. Tom probably would have liked to join, but he's on vacation this week, so just me.
Good for him. Do you have a PowerPoint, or is it just gonna be you chatting?
I do. I have a PowerPoint, and so I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen, please. And I will let you, Ernie, introduce yourself. I'll just mention I've been collaborating with Ernie. Ernie is a representative from Thule, and we do have a Thule system installed in our vineyard. And we have also started playing with Thule Vision. So I'm very excited about what Ernie is going to be able to share with us. Ernie, please take it away.
Sure. Can you see my screen okay?
It's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for inviting me today, Miguel. Hello, everybody. My name is Ernie Wilson. I am the North Coast, or you can even say Northern California account manager for Thule. Thule works, about 85% of our sensor network is in wine grapes, predominantly on the coast. But we also have a lot of sensors in the San Joaquin Valley, in both grapes and in a lot of tree nut production. It's definitely a growth area for us right now because they are super water limited, more so than we are, even though everybody, you can make a case, is water limited this season. So let me just hop right in here. I'm going to give you guys just a brief introduction to who we are, what our company, who we are, what we do, and then I'll show you the different products that we offer. So we were founded in 2014. Our headquarters is in Davis. Our company vision is to help generations of growers make irrigation decisions. We are not a startup anymore. We're not taking on any venture capital money. We are a profitable company that's in this for the long haul. We have a 12-person team. We are growing. And we have 4 local field technicians throughout the state. In the North Coast, our technician is in Napa, as am I. Our technology is patented. We are the only commercial technology that measures actual evapotranspiration. When I say commercial technology, there are other methods of measuring actual ET, but those are more research grade devices. And we have a network of roughly 1,200 sensors, I think now, throughout California. We span all the way up into Modoc County, and we go all the way down to the Mexican border down in the Imperial Valley. This screenshot that you're looking at here, it's from a few years back, but to give you a rough idea of our coverage within Napa and parts of Sonoma. Thule has 2 products. Up until this season, we only had 1 product, but now we have 2. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of those. Our first product, which is our core product, which allows us to do everything, including create our second product, is our actual ET sensors. And then this season, we launched a new product that is called Thule Vision, which is an iPhone app where you take a video of your vineyard and it can give you approximate the average leaf water potential. So we'll talk a little bit about how we were able to create this artificial intelligence tool. So we'll start by talking about our ET sensors. As I mentioned, we are the first and only tool that measures field scale actual ET. And we'll talk a little bit about what field scale means too, because that's one of the things that differentiates Thule from other irrigation management tools is we're measuring over a broad area. So we measure over a broad area of vineyard. We measure crop stress daily. So we'll tell you every single day when you log into your Thule app or the Thule web dashboard or the email that we send out, what's the current water status of your vineyard. We also, as a grower, you're going to set a target of water stress, and we're going to provide irrigation recommendations to keep you within that target. On the bottom left, there is a picture of Tom. He's our CEO. He's highly involved with our customers as well. He developed Thule during his PhD work in atmospheric science at UC Davis. Tom got a master's in vitinology from UC Davis, and then he went on to get his PhD in atmospheric science. So let's start by defining actual evapotranspiration. I was a little bit late to this webinar today. I've done this with Miguel before, and he usually also defines what ET means, but we like to start our presentations by defining it because that's what we do, and that's what unlocks our ability to do these other things. So ET is the combined processes of evaporation of water from the soil and plant surfaces and transpiration of water through the plant tissues. In other words, it's the total water use. What we're measuring is the total water use of your vineyard. So if you think about the vineyard in spring or early spring in this season, when it's raining and you have cover crop growth, we're measuring the evapotranspiration that's taking place from the cover crop, from standing water. However, when we move into the summer months, when we don't have any standing water, you're not flood irrigating anymore. We can really start to isolate, and there's no cover crop, we can really start to isolate what we're measuring is the transpiration that's taking place through the vines. When a lot of folks think about ET and not realizing that they can actually measure the ET of their vineyard, people tend to think about reference ET. Reference ET is a starting point for making irrigation decisions. Reference ET is not the ET of your vineyard. It's the ET of a well-watered lawn. They're maintained by CIMMYS stations. CIMMYS, the local one, at least closest to me in Napa, is in Oakville. I don't know what's going on with the one by you, Miguel.
It's not working.
Not yet. All right. Well,
no.
we'll talk about that. So anyways, I just wanted to make that, that point that we measure actual ET in vineyards or in crop fields. We are not using reference ET. How does Thule measure actual evapotranspiration? We utilize a process called surface renewal. I mentioned that we are the only commercial technology that measures actual ET, and there's other technologies, research grade technologies that measure actual ET. Surface renewal is also one of those research grade devices. It's called a surface renewal station. It's what researchers use to measure ET in crops and to measure crop coefficients. What Thule has done is we've created a commercially scalable version of the surface renewal method. Essentially what surface renewal is doing is it's measuring how much water vapor is leaving the field. The picture that we're looking at here shows these swirling eddies, swirling units of wind called an eddy. The wind has a certain amount of fetch or length where our sensors are placed 7-8 feet up in the air right above the canopy. That eddy of wind is anywhere, really it maxes out at about 300 feet. So we are going to be, as the wind runs along the surface of the canopy, it's picking up water vapor, and we're going to be telling you about that larger area over which that wind has traveled. So again, that's one of the differentiating things about Thule is we're measuring over a broad area. 300 feet, or really depending on what the wind conditions look like, anywhere from 1 to 3 acres, potentially more. When we're talking walnut trees, we can measure up to 10 acres. This is important when you start thinking about where you would place a Thule sensor in a block. In this block that we're looking at in this image here, this is probably on the smaller side of blocks that we would be able to work in. We're not going to be able to work in a block that's really under 1.5 acres, because we could potentially then be measuring outside of that block. So we like to think about things in terms of irrigation zones. When you place a sensor, a Thule sensor in a vineyard, you want to think about what you're trying to capture, what kind of indicators you're looking for. Perhaps in this block, the sensor was placed on the left or west side of the block because that's a less vigorous section, and you want to know about those early indicators of stress. This is what a Thule device looks like in a field. You guys may have seen them when you are traveling up and down Napa Valley or wherever you guys farm. The sensor is placed up in this cage here. That cage is quite simply a bird cage, so birds don't come and whack the sensor. But in the sensor is measuring the actual evapotranspiration, and it's also measuring the water stress. And we'll talk about in a second how we actually measure water stress. Down below, what you don't see here, I'm going to put a picture on the right, and we also tap into your irrigation system, into both your primary or your double poly, and we can measure when your system is on, when it's off, and given your irrigation specs, we can approximate how much water has been applied. So let's talk about what influences field scale water use, because this is kind of what's driving some of these other things that we're able to do by measuring actual ET. So, oops, sorry. If we could start at the bottom here, we can see that actual water use equals the weather. So it's pretty intuitive. On a hotter day, your plants, if they have access to if they have an ample water supply, will use more water than they would on a cool or overcast day. The canopy size is also going to dictate how much water your plants use. A vineyard in Napa on VSP is going to use less water than a vineyard in Lodi on a quad trellis system. And then lastly, water stress is also going to dictate how much water your crops use. The more stressed your crop is, the more stressed your vineyards are, they're going to regulate and use less water. this is an abbreviated deck that I'm showing you here. So I want to just talk a little bit about these individual components here. We are measuring the actual ET. We are getting the influence of weather through reference ET. Reference ET I talked about is a well-watered grass lawn in your area. We have built out a proprietary spatial CIMIS model to approximate what your field would use if it were a well-watered grass field using different weather inputs. And then we also measure the canopy size. We actually measure the canopy in your vineyard. And so that's what we'll talk about in the next slide, because being able to measure the canopy size, we're going to be able to isolate for water stress. So early in the season, we talked about how your cover crop is influencing the ET as well as precipitation events. So you can see here these vertical teal bars is precipitation. And back in March, your field scale KC, field scale canopy size, including everything that's transpiring or all the evaporation is taking place, is all the way up here to about 100% or a 1.0 KC. Then as your cover crop starts to dry down a little bit, or when you mow, about the same time as when your vines are starting to grow. And at that point, we can start to isolate that vine canopy growth. At some point, our system is saying, okay, we know around this time of year is when canopies start to fill out in whatever region that you're in. At that point, our system is saying, is your canopy still growing? By looking at your average canopy size each week. Once your canopy size reaches a maximum, we can define that as the max canopy. That is your canopy size for the season. And we can start to isolate water stress. So that's where in field stat is Thuley's unit of water stress. Academically, that's referred to as KS. So now that we've measured the canopy size, we can start to measure the water stress daily. So the water stress, I'm going to start by looking at this equation here, and then we'll look at this graph. The water stress is your actual ET, what was measured in the vineyard every day, compared to the potential ET. What would your vineyard use if fully irrigated? So if we're looking at this graph here, I think the colors are pretty self-explanatory, but towards the top here, we're looking at low stress, and towards the bottom, it's higher stress. The blue vertical bars in this graph are irrigation events. So again, we're measuring when the irrigation is on and when it's off. So you can see this right y-axis is how many gallons per vine that you applied. Each one of these dots represents a different daily water status. If we're looking at this graph today, today is August 15th. In your current water status, excuse me, today is August 16th. Yesterday's measured water status was roughly 55%, meaning you used 55% as much water as you could have if fully irrigated. So that deficit would be stress. You can see the declining trends in the graph that take place after your irrigation events. So these are the dry downs that happen after the irrigation events. So we can take it then a step further, because every single day we're measuring the actual ET and seeing what the change in the water status is. And we're also measuring the applied irrigation to see what the change in water status is. After a certain period, we can begin to then model that plant-water relation in the block and say not only what your current water status is, but if you do not irrigate, we can forecast where your stress is going to be. That brings us to our irrigation recommendations, because when we're looking at this graph here, what you notice is you don't see this teal bar, horizontal bar that's running through the graph. That teal bar is the goal that the grower sets. For different stages of crop development, you're going to set a goal. typically in reds in the North Coast, we see a deficit irrigation strategy pre-veraison, right? So you could set your target to be kind of medium stress and then less stress as you move into harvest. That's just one method. So again, in this graph here, we're looking at the water stress target that this grower has set, which is saying that they want medium to low stress, or 60 to 75% field stat, KS. And you can see when they irrigate, they were within their target in the previous stage here, and then you got this dry down. When your water status goes below your target, it will trigger an irrigation recommendation from Thule. So if we're looking at, again, this site without a target, you can see that you're going to continue to dry down and get more stress. However, now we know that you're more stressed than your target. Therefore, you need to irrigate today. And given what we know about the plant-water relations in the block, if you irrigate 9 gallons per vine, it will take you back to the top of your water stress target so you can maintain this area of medium stress. So that's an overview of the insights that we provide with Thule's sensors. The way that we give this data to our customers is through the web interface. The graphs that we're looking at are directly from our web dashboard. We have an iPhone app, which gives you more high-level information. Is your site in alert, meaning is it more stressed than your target? Or is it on target? Are you within that stress threshold that you've set? And then we also send a weekly email because I know a lot of growers, they like to make their decisions, irrigation decisions on Monday, but this is a direct snapshot from the web dashboard. We looked at that graph that's showing the dry downs in between irrigation events. Our web dashboard simplifies everything by saying, if we're looking at this Pinot Noir block here, your current actual water stress is slightly below your target of low stress. What was the ET the past 7 days? How much did you apply the last 7 days? Since you're below your target, we're going to tell you that you need to irrigate today, and you'll need to irrigate 4.5 hours to recover from that target. So that is our Thule ET sensor product. This year we have released a new product. It's called Thule Vision. Thule Vision is an iPhone app where you shoot a video of your vineyard and it will tell you the approximate average leaf water potential of that area that you just recorded. So how does Thule Vision work? Well, in order for us to be able to tell you in units of leaf water potential, it goes back to our sensor's measurement of water stress, which is field stat. Field stat, or again, KS, has been correlated at UC Davis and at the Kearney Ag Center with leaf water potential. So that if you have low stress or above 75% field stat, when we're looking at that graph, that's the equivalent of about less than 12 bars. Whereas if you had high stress or 50 to 65% on field stat, that would be the equivalent of anywhere from 13 to 15 bars. So this is important to understand in how we were able to develop this correlation and this artificial intelligence model. This is our 7th growing season. We have 1,200 sensors in California, about 1,000 of those in wine grapes, in a variety of growing conditions in different varietals. Our team of field technicians has been taking photos for the past 7 seasons in vineyards. When they take those photos, we were able to attribute a water stress measurement to each one of those photos. And over time, we built up a database, a library of roughly 30,000 photos. We had more photos, but we trimmed it down to where it was a full picture of the canopy and what was the water stress for that day. And we then correlated, we did the correlation, we attributed the a leaf water potential value to each one of those photos. So that when you're using the app, when you're recording the vineyard, it's taking 30 frames per second and feeding each one of those frames, each one of those images through the AI model. So each one of those images gets a leaf water potential measurement, to where you press stop on the record and it averages all of those images and tells you the approximate leaf water potential over the area that you just walked. On your phone, it's going to tell you what the average leaf water potential is. What's really cool is it's not just sending a leaf water potential value, it's also sending a GPS location. And so you're able to start to map what the water stress looks like in your vineyard. So on the web interface, it sends all that information. It also sends, I said that we mentioned that we do one out of, it's 30 frames per second. One out of every 90 of those frames, so one out of every 3 seconds, or however long you walked during those 3 seconds, we send an image. We don't send every single image to the web interface because that would require a lot of data. And so you're able to actually log into the web dashboard, and you can see here, this is one of our users, that these are the individual sessions that took place within that vineyard. And you can see back on June 19th, they had less stress. A week later, you can see that they started to have more stress. So Thule Vision is a standalone product that's telling you simply what's the water status of the vineyard. It's not telling you the different information that we're seeing in the Thule sensor product, which is not measuring applied irrigation. So you can't look at this and know if that average reading of 12 on June 24th is because you didn't irrigate. That's one thing that you can, this visibility that you can have if you had the Thule ET product. So that's my presentation for today, guys. Here's my contact information. You don't have to remember this, just look up Thule and send us an email or give us a call if you guys are interested in learning more.
Thank you so much, Ernie. Really appreciate it. We have a couple minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions, I do have a comment and a couple questions for you, Ernie. First of all, I think that this Thule Vision product, it's incredibly exciting. I have tried it myself for a couple of weeks now since it came out. I actually had to buy an old iPhone because it's not on Android. And I'm not an iPhone, I'm not an Apple guy, but I went go ahead and bought a used iPhone just for this purpose because I've been working with other growers that have been using it, and it's extremely exciting. This tool is essentially replacing the need for a pressure bomb. You don't have to go out there with a pressure bomb. This will give you an estimate of the water stress on your vines. And so far, my opinion, it's actually very accurate. And I'm not just saying that, I truly believe it. And I'm very excited to see the end of the season, how it goes. But so far I've been using it. What I love about it is that you don't even have to stop. You can just walk. In some cases, I've even driven in an ATV, and you keep recording, you keep showing the screen, and the screen will keep showing you the value. So you don't even have to stop and snap a picture or anything. You can just slowly walk around. And I think as long as you get the whole canopy, and correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, but I think as long as you get the whole canopy, you're good. With the pressure bomb, you're looking at one leaf. I think that's an important distinction. With Thule Vision, you're looking at the entire canopy. But I would personally and professionally recommend for anybody that is interested about it to let me know if you have questions for me as a user. But I'm pretty sure that this is going to take off, honestly. So I would recommend that anybody interested should give it a try. And if you already have the Thule sensors, I think you get some of the service for free, correct, Ernie?
Yeah, so if you have Thule sensors, Thule Vision is free to use in blocks with Thule sensors. The pricing is go ahead.
But you can get the service if you sign up for it without having to pay for the sensors, correct?
Yes, yeah, you don't have to have Thule sensors to have Thule Vision. They're two separate products.
I would recommend for anybody to at least give it a try personally. And I'm not getting paid or anything in return to say this. It's just my personal humble opinion. It's a very promising technology, honestly. And I got the opportunity to talk with more people from Thule, and they've answered all my questions. And I think that to me, the way that they're doing it, scientifically speaking, makes a lot of sense. So it gets my seal of approval. Um, I have a couple questions here. Somebody is asking if this works for any other crops or if it's just for grapes.
The way we were able, so the way that these, I'm not an artificial intelligence expert, but the way that Tom would frame this is the way that we were able to build a model is because we have such a robust database of water stress measurements and photos that correlate to those water stress measurements. The almond growers are very excited about having Thule, a product like Thule Vision in almonds, but we just don't have enough photos yet to be able to build a model that the way that these models work is they have to have a certain amount of confidence. There's like these confidence ratings, and it won't have enough confidence if it doesn't have enough data being fed into the model. So not yet.
Given enough pictures, you should be able to expand these to any crop. The technology should be transferable, right?
That's true. And another exciting thing too, Miguel, is that for our users that have Thule sensors, if they're out there using Thule Vision, that's only adding more data to the model and refining that model, because when they're taking photos, we also have that water stress measurement that the sensor is providing. So this is year one for Thule Vision, and in year one, the model is only going to get better because we're feeding more data into it and refining that model.
And that leads to our final question. How accurate is it?
So when we did our beta testing last summer, we worked with 5 different vineyard management companies throughout the state. The majority of the time, Thule was within 1 bar of a pressure bomb measurement. We are not going to tell you 13.2 bars. Thule Vision will tell you 13 bars or 14 bars. It's not going to tell you in between.
Yeah, that's a good distinction there. And just from my end as a user, it matches what I'm seeing. So if the vines don't look too good, Thule Vision will tell me that. The best way, I think, would be to try it. I think just to give it a try, it wouldn't be too expensive if you just want to try it. Just like anything else, like I mentioned in the workshop on Wednesday, anything that we suggest you try, feel free to try it on the small scale. You don't have to go crazy with it. So, okay, well, thank you so much, Ernie. I really appreciate your time. We're going to move on. So please go ahead and mute yourself and turn off your camera, Ernie. Our next speaker, it's Dylan Landstrom, and he is a representative for Vintel. I've actually had the pleasure to work with Dylan. We have their system installed in our vineyard. We are new users. We just have begun utilizing it. But I'm very happy that we are able to put it to the test. It is really promising. Besides that, I've had the opportunity to work with Dylan with other things on his own vineyard projects. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. We can see your screen just fine. Go ahead, take it away.
Cool. Hey, thanks so much, Miguel. I appreciate you having me. Thanks to Napa County RCD for putting this on. I'm Dylan Lundstrom. I work with ITK Inc. and I support Vintel in the US market. Quickly, before we go into the tool, just my background is I've been working in ag tech for 7 years. So I spent a few years with Ranch Systems supporting their hardware in the field and a year with Fruition Sciences. I have a master's in viticulture and enology. I studied over in France. And from that program, I completed a master thesis project using SAPflow technology to apply deficit irrigation in 6 California vineyards. That study followed fruit maturation, grape composition, So that really helped me tie together what's happening out in the vineyard with our desired outcome in the cellar and the resulting wine. So I enjoy irrigation management. I love being in the vineyards. So supporting Vintel is a natural fit. And I'm excited to share the tool with you today. Okay, so Vintel was created by ITK. ITK is the mother company. They are also located in Montpellier, France. They're a research and data focused company. They specialize in crop modeling. They have an array of applications throughout agriculture, focusing on different crops and different problems within different industries. The models are designed to support farmers. Ideally, they're ensuring yields, improving quality, decreasing inputs, and mitigating risk. A few models that are interesting to viticulture is their model that predicts mildew pressure. That model currently is exclusively in the EU. We're working to embed that within Vintel, hopefully in the next season. We just had a question as well about nutrition. We're working on a nitrogen availability tool that will look at plant nutrition, and that will also be, that's largely dependent on plant water availability and irrigation. And so that hopefully will also be embedded within the Vintel tool by next season. And then we have Vintel, which is our flagship product for wine grapes, and we will speak about that today. So in the US, there's just 3 of us. We're a small office. So chances are, if we connect after this presentation, we do demos of the tool. So most likely that will be with me. Before we look at the tool, let's quickly look at the problem we're trying to solve. So the question I'd like to pose is, if I ask everybody on the call, how do you manage your irrigation? How do you define a successful irrigation program? As we have seen, you're going to get a diverse set of answers. Again, if I ask how you monitor and record your irrigation applications, you're going to have a diverse set of tools. Some of these tools are tools that we've spoken about. We have the pressure bomb, we have soil moisture, leaf barometer, sap flow. How are you incorporating all those? From Adrian's talk, we heard how she's kind of using a toolbox to inform her decisions. So typically irrigation strategies are going to be determined by a desired outcome, whether that's driven by yield, whether that's driven by quality, and sometimes it's just if water is available. So from there, we have all of our specific vineyards. There's all different variables across those vineyards. We have different locations, different varietals. It can be spaced differently. We have different soil types, slope, orientation, et cetera, et cetera. So every vineyard is going to be unique. And how do we decide best as a viticulturalist what that vine planted in this location, experiencing these specific climatic conditions, is going to require? So really, irrigation management comes down to 2 major questions. How do we know when to irrigate, and how do we know how much to irrigate? This is how Vintel can help. Vintel predicts leaf water potential, so both pre-dawn and midday, and it provides a 7-day irrigation forecast. There's no in-field hardware that's required, and there's no downtime waiting to collect data. In addition, if you have any historical data, we can digest that data from day 1 and make actionable insights moving forward. Some of our results last year in 2019, we compiled grower data for growers that have used the tool for more than 2 years. And we found that growers using Vintel for 2 or more years had saved a substantial amount of water. That is by volume of application. Vintel is also able to help increase dry down. We define dry down as number of days post-bloom before the first irrigation. So any irrigations pre-bloom would be not considered in that dry down number. It would be your first irrigation. The pre-bloom is to help grow the canopy. Post-bloom is how we calculate that dry down number. So the longer dry down, decreased irrigation is going to help improve canopy management, help improve pest and disease control, and potentially improve your fruit quality. There's also economic consideration. This is going to be different for each vineyard, but what's the labor that you're saving, the energy, and potentially water pumping costs that you're saving by delaying those irrigations or saving on several irrigations across the season. So this is Vintel's interface. We've got a few different panels. There's a lot going on there. Again, we can do a demo following this workshop. We're happy to meet with you and your team to explain it a little bit more in depth. To go into it quickly, Vintel uses variables from your vineyard. It's going to overlay site-specific weather data. The model is able to accurately predict plant water stress with greater than 85% confidence. So we have pre-dawn leaf water potential and midday leaf water potential that are predicted. Site-specific variables, which we'll go into, are added to the model. These include soil composition, rooting depth, plant and row spacing, varietal, trellis type, and leaf area. If you have historical irrigation or pressure bomb data, we can work with your team on site to incorporate all of that information into the Vintel model. And that is going to improve accuracy and insights from day one. So working with Vintel, we see our clients as partners, and we're going to work together with you to reach your outcomes. So really your success is our success. We can connect by text, phone, email, are all helpful, in addition to meeting out in the field. Finally, gridded weather data is provided by the model. It has 1 kilometer resolution. There's no weather station required. If you do have a microclimate station on site, you can use that. However, we find most of our users with microclimate stations have moved to our gridded weather data that is provided. To get into a few of these panels a little bit more in depth, this is the irrigation forecast, largely why we're here today. Here you can see this irrigation forecast is calling for, it's a 7-day irrigation forecast. It's calling for 5.5 gallons a week from the day that you're looking at it. In addition, you have max advised irrigation total. This is something that Miguel touched on Wednesday. This is calculated by soil composition. So we're asking, and we'll go into this, but sand and clay percent from that. We know the soil composition. Based on the soil composition and the rooting depth, greater than a 19-gallon irrigation would be blowing past the root zone for this particular block. And then you have a daily accumulation of water requirements. So each grower is going to be different. This is completely configurable. Something that we'll go into if you're interested in a demo is configuring the green zone to each user. That's a little bit more advanced, but we can go further into any questions as well. Next, we have the main graph here. So this is pre-dawn leaf water potential. Being developed by a French team, pre-dawn leaf water potential, which is taken before the sun comes up, so you don't have any climatic demand on the plant. It's a little bit more popular, I think, in France than it is in California. In California, we're using midday. I find that's a little bit more common. However, pre-dawn without that climatic conditions, it makes for a less noisy graph. As you can see in the midday graph here, you have quite a bit more noise in the profile. So these profiles are including phenological dates, so it allows you to compare season to season. So we're incorporating phenological dates. The y-axis here is your stress threshold. So pre-dawn, you're going to expect a bit less stress than you would midday. So onto the midday graph. As you can see, these small icons, these would actually be readings that are taken either during the season or held historically by the grower. They can be incorporated into the model. So if you come to us and you're interested in setting up a trial, should you have historical irrigation or pressure bomb data, we can put that into the model and help calibrate the model from the first day moving forward. Finally, we have the weather data. This is kind of a quick snapshot. The weather data is used to calculate ET within the model. There are a few other parameters, including global radiation and humidity, that are included in this. This is just on the main page. So it gives you kind of a quick idea of what weather's doing out in the field. And then you can dive deeper into that if you want to actually go look at the weather data that's being pulled in. So underneath underneath Vento and kind of how the model does what it does, you have to set up each block. And to do that, we have 5 steps. And the first step is just naming the block. We're going to skip that today. This is the second block info variables that need to be put into Vento. Here you can see we're asking for vine row spacing. At the bottom there, you have irrigation system. So how much water is being applied to each vine. That helps us calculate water application. In addition, we have varietal, planting year. All of this is helping model what that plant is actually doing out in the field. What's kind of neat here is we have the sensitivity to heat waves tool. This was new to us last year, I believe. It allows the grower to set normal, sensitive, or ignore. It's interesting throughout some of the regions in California. We're working with some growers that really love this tool. Depending on the region and heat accumulation, it can be a very interesting tool to tally heat wave events and the impact accumulated heat wave days have on the resulting wine. So it's a great tool to incorporate with your winemaking team or your cellar team. Next is geolocation. Geolocation provides an icon on the map. In addition to that, geolocation is going to take into account the topography of that location, the slope, and then how the weather is behaving in that geolocation on the map. Soil, I'm looking forward to hearing Miguel's feedback on the tool. We've just started working together. So what we're doing here is we're taking sand and clay percent. So we're calculating water holding capacity, plant available water within the model. This is how we are calculating the maximum irrigation advised for that particular block. And then root depth. And root depth is calculated as a single variable within the tool, which is a little bit limited as far as how many rootstock varietals are out there and the complexity of a root system. However, we find that by using a single variable, it allows us the accuracy to So the root depth variable here is a single variable, and then we have stoniness as well, the rock content of that site. And finally, we have the annual variables. It allows us to calculate the leaf area index. So what we have is the supply, you have soil composition and rooting depth. That is where your water availability is coming from. And then you have your annual variables, which is going to be your leaf area index. So we have a few different trellis systems that you can use, pretty much what you'll find out in the fields. And then from there, your measurements, so height and width of your canopy, and that is going to allow the model to simulate canopy growth throughout the seasons. So each season as well, you can go back to 2015, so each season can be managed a little bit differently, and that is one of the major benefits of a model is being able to run it into the past. And then finally, this is a Vento comparison, so all of that's great, and the question is how do we know at the end of the season, and having spoken with the growers over the years, the question is kind of what if at the end of the year? How could I have managed that season a little bit differently? What if I had irrigated more? If I had irrigated less? Would you overstress your vines? How does that impact the fruit? Could we improve fruit quality? Could we improve the price per ton that we're selling our fruit for? With Vento, we have this statistical model. So as you can see on the top, we have the actual block. On the bottom here, we have Vento recommendations. This is considering a complete season for 2019. It compares what the user actually did versus what would have happened if we took Vento's recommendation throughout the entire season. So this can be run against historical data. So if you come and you have your historical irrigation data, and we can compare, what would Vento recommend versus what was done. As you can see here, what the user applied was 106 hours of total irrigation versus Vintel recommendations of 90 hours for this block. And then you have the implications on dry down. So again, here, the grower actually irrigated 9 days after bloom, where with the Vintel model, you could expect up to 35 days with very similar stress thresholds. So 3.3, 3.7 is negligible in that sense. So with that, that's my presentation for today. Appreciate your guys' time. And this is my information. If you're interested in a demo, would love to walk you through the tool a little bit more in depth.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and leave your screen there just for a couple minutes, just so that people can look at your contact information.
Yep.
If you don't mind. So we're gonna open up some questions for Dylan here. We're hearing from Camille Ram says, so is pre-dawn water potential actually measured in the vineyard?
Pre-dawn leaf water potential is measured in the vineyard. So what Vintel is doing is we're predicting the pre-dawn leaf water potential measurement. I am gonna go back to slide 3. What we are essentially predicting is the reading from a pressure bomb. And a pressure bomb can be taken out to the field. And these pieces of equipment can, I guess they weigh probably somewhere around 40, 50 pounds. Unless you have an ATV on site, they're rather cumbersome to use. They're heavy. You have to continuously refill them with gas. So what we're predicting is what the pressure bomb is reading pre-dawn, which is before the sun comes up, and you have those climatic demands.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else has any questions for Dylan? I'm gonna wait another minute. In the meantime, Dylan, I am very excited to see what your system does for us. One thing that we like to do in our demonstration vineyard, its name is Wichita Creek, by the way, I hadn't mentioned that, is we intentionally overdo things. So we have Thule, we have Vintel, we have Irrometer, we have ranch systems. We have all of these systems coexistent together for the sake of, first of all, comparison, so that we can compare what these different technologies are doing, but also so that you guys get a chance to see it offhand before you even buy it. So I just started working with Vintel. I'm excited about it. And in the next few months, if anybody has questions for me about it, I'm more than happy to answer them. I think the interesting thing that is unique about Vintel, that it's based on models that you input all the information, but also like Dylan was mentioning, you can corroborate with doing pressure bomb measurements or any other measurements just to double check. But if I understand it correctly, as you work with it, it becomes better and better, right, Dylan? The more information you feed into the system, eventually it becomes a better prediction. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with growers that have, data from 2019, I spoke with a grower this morning. He called me, said, this is what I'm seeing in the field. If we compare to, it's a click of a button to go back and look at what the behavior of the vine and Vintel predictions were in 2019. How does that compare to what you're seeing out in the field now? This is where we were a year ago. Does it sound about right? Is that what you're seeing? From that, we can calibrate the model. We have a pressure bomb. The idea is to get away from the pressure bomb and save time. So some growers that approach us, they're taking pressure bombs weekly. With this tool, you can cut those pressure bombs at least in half. If not going out, maybe just once or twice a season to make sure that the model's tracking correctly.
Interesting. And Dylan, are you guys using this on any other crop systems, or is it just for grapes at the moment?
Yeah, so we have we have a beta version that is being launched for almonds. That should be ready by next season. So by, I guess it's bloom in almonds, it's February. So that should be ready to go next season. From almonds, we'll spin that off onto walnuts, pistachios, potentially citrus. So really any crop is possible. We have row crop models, and ITK really works with anybody that's interested in adding value to their agriculture commodity. So Vintel is our flagship in the US market, kind of specifically in California, just because we have so many wine grapes here. We also work with growers up through Oregon and Washington as well. We have growers in the Southern Hemisphere that are using Vintel, as well as throughout Europe. So
yeah, if you do business in Napa, you know it's going to be grapes. Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, that's the case. I myself have got an opportunity to work with other crops. This is the first time in my career that I focus only on one crop, because I don't think there's anywhere else in the state or the country where you can go and it's only one thing. You know, it's always some diversification, and you just go outside of Napa and you already have walnuts and almonds and everything else. So it's interesting to see that these companies and these technologies are working on expanding it, because I know some of our audience today, it's definitely working with other crop systems. And I like to tell them that these concepts apply to them as well. It's just that by default, some of these companies and technologies are going to be focused on grapes, but it's nice to see that things are expanding. All right, Dylan, any last thoughts that you have?
I think that's it. Happy to do demos for anybody that's interested in more information. Take my information, send an email, give me a call. Awesome. I appreciate you putting this on, Miguel. It's been an awesome workshop so far.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we appreciate your time very much, and very excited for the collaboration that we're doing. Thank you so much, Dylan. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker. Dylan, please go ahead and mute your microphone and turn off your, oh, you didn't have your camera. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dylan. All right, folks, we're coming down to our last presentation. We're going to hear from Tyler and Terrence from Ranch Systems. And Ranch Systems is also a semi-local company. We do have some of their technology installed in our vineyard as well. I have some of their soil moisture probes, and thanks to them, I can turn on and off my irrigation from my computer at home. So that's some of my favorite things about Ranch Systems, that I can do a lot of things remotely. I do manage our vineyard in Carneros. Unfortunately, it's just one of my many responsibilities. If it would be my only responsibility, I would definitely walk in more and be more present. But because I have to do things a lot from my office or from home, it gives me an opportunity to actually turn on and off my irrigation remotely. So Tyler, I think, let's see here. Do we have Tyler?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. And then we should have made Terrence presenter as well. Terrence, do we have you?
They've both been given permission.
Hello,
Okay,
this is Terrence. Hi, everybody.
Okay, there you go. Who's going to share the screen, Tyler or Terrence?
So I got the presentation up, so I can share my screen.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen, Tyler, and begin your presentation, and take it away.
All right.
All right, we see it. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Let's back up real quick. Okay, I'm Tyler. I'm with Ranch Systems, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how we play into irrigation management. So Ranch Systems, we make these strong, sturdy, outdoor rated, it's basically a field computer. You can see a couple photos here on the right and at the bottom. Those are some of our field units. And those are installed out in your field, and you can hook those up to a variety of sensors. They also have in most cases, they have a cell modem on them. And so that's going to bring the sensor data from your field to our online software. Okay, so for this presentation, we're going to be talking about weather monitoring, soil moisture monitoring, and irrigation tracking and control. So here we have our Ranch Systems Pro weather station installed in a vineyard, and it's hooked up to an RS-130. So with your complete weather station, you're going to be able to measure and record rain, wind, temperature, humidity, and solar radiation. With the combination of that data, you can track your ETO. So with the Pro Weather Station, you have the flexibility of installing your sensors according to exactly where you'd like them. So for example, here you can see the temperature sensor is installed in the canopy. So it's getting a good reading for what the fruit is experiencing. So here we have, we also installed Davis weather stations is what you're seeing here. You don't have as much flexibility with manipulating the specific sensor install locations. But yeah, so here you see Davis weather station hooked up to RS300. Here's another Davis with a RS130 in the field. Here's another one. All right, so let's go towards soil moisture now. Here we have a soil moisture probe installed, and alongside it is a pressure sensor. So these probes, you can get them in various sizes depending on the the part of the soil you're looking to measure. And these probes have, like you see with the red dots, those are sensors placed throughout the probe, so you can see the specific readings from those levels. We are compatible with quite a few different types of probes. So that's one of our key features with ranch systems is we're very compatible with a variety of sensors. Here's a soil moisture monitoring station in a vineyard. This one, you don't have a close-up, but here we have a Centec drill and drop installed. So here's a frame grab from our online software. So here you can see the lines starting with the blue line up top. So that's the uppermost sensor on the probe. And then down below that, you have the 8-inch sensor, the 16-inch down to 40-inch. The two lines at the bottom, that's the data from the pressure sensor. So the pressure sensor is helpful in tracking that irrigation event. You can see your pressure throughout the event, and you can also just track the duration of the event. And so one thing with the probe data here that's helpful, you can see how the different levels respond to the irrigation event. So you can see the upper sensors on the probe responding more aggressively and quickly to the irrigation event. And you can also see how long it might take for the moisture to get down to the lower sensors on the probe. So this is a frame grab from our app. So we have an app version which allows you to display the data in different ways. So here on the left, you see these gauges are showing an average from your various blocks. And then we have the 4B gauge selected, and that's showing you a more in-depth look at what that probe is picking up. So this is, once again, a frame grab from our app. So we also have other tools that help you monitor your irrigation events. We can interface with flow meters. We install pressure sensors, well level sensors, tank and reservoir sensors as well. Here's what a pressure transducer looks like installed in your irrigation line. This will just help you track your, the pressure during your irrigation event and the duration. So you can look back later on and see your times, your specific irrigation times. And these can also be handy in helping you find things like leaks or clogs in your irrigation line. If the pressure is not responding as you'd expect, you can can help you find issues. Here is a frame grab of some of the pressure sensor data on our app. And with the app, it can give you a lot of other handy info. So that's one benefit of our online software. So here we have a picture of a unit hooked up to a pump. So we could control that pump and monitor the water coming out of the pump, so we can track the gallons per minute and flow rates, and you can kind of get alerts if any of your irrigation events don't happen as you expect. So noted here, this was installed in 2013, so these stations can last quite a while if they're maintained properly. We can also control valves. Here we are hooked up to a valve station. We got latching solenoid valves, so we can hook up to those and open and close those remotely. Okay, so from here, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Terrence, and he's going to take over from this point. Thank you.
Hi, this is Terrence with Ranch Systems. Thanks for joining, and thanks Miguel for putting this presentation together. So I want to talk a little bit about our irrigation control. And let me just share my screen here so I can get to the same point in the presentation where Tyler left off here. Okay. So our remote irrigation control platform allows for several features, which I'm going to talk about now. The most important is alerting, letting you know what is going on in the field. Now, Ranch Cloud can send out alerts immediately upon an irrigation event or problem happening through a text message, a call, or an email. And that's just up to the individual user's account preferences as to how they receive that alert. We use for the irrigation what we call feedback sensors. So for every irrigation valve, there's a place to attach a sensor of some type, whether that be a pressure transducer, a pressure switch, or a flow meter. And that sensor value needs to change, or it needs to be within a certain range when that valve is on. So typically we'll install a pressure transducer after the valve, and then that just confirms that when that valve is open, that the irrigation actually took place. And if it, for whatever reason it doesn't, somebody forgot to turn the pump on, or there's a leak upstream, the system will actually reach out to the user. Another use of that would be, low water in a reservoir. If you're pumping and there's a risk of possibly running the pump dry, Ranch Cloud can help you to avoid that with our alerting. Next, we have a program-based scheduler. So this is for scheduling irrigation valves. The program-based scheduler operates all of the connected valves in the farm. The user can create one or more programs, and they can select which programs are active. So we can see here I have a screenshot with a couple of programs that I have set up on my test farm. The programs can be triggered what we call traditionally with a time schedule. So, they start every other day or every third day at 7 a.m. or whenever you start your irrigation. But we can also trigger irrigation start based on a rule. So a grower with soil moisture probes installed can set up a program that when they reach their target moisture, that the program kicks on automatically. The other thing that the rules can do is if a program is active, as we saw in the previous slide, we have this active program here, a rule can actually determine Number one, if that program actually runs or whether it gets skipped. And it can also change the budget of that program. So the budget just being a percentage multiplier of how long the water runs. So a typical application would be, set your ET calculated target. And, if you exceed that by 20%, increase the budget by 20%. So rules can start a program. They can skip a program if it's supposed to run, or they can, as I mentioned, change the budget of a program. In this example, the user has set up a rule based on the 24-hour average temperature, which modifies the program budget. So essentially, when it's hot, the system's going to irrigate 120% of normal, and when it's cool, the system's going to irrigate 80% of normal. Users can choose a fixed order to run the valves in, or they can enter in average flow rates for each valve. If the user enters in the average flow rate, the system can be put in a mode where it's going to calculate, based on the maximum demand set by the user, which valves can run, and it's going to pack them into the smallest overall duration possible. We developed this because we found that a lot of growers have challenging irrigation situations, where earlier in the season they might have, they have enough water, the pump can deliver enough, the system can produce enough water. But as you get towards the end of the summer, it becomes challenging to kind of fit all of the sets in. So we have the ability to compute based on flow rates per valve and keep that system running in a good pressure zone. So we have a very comprehensive platform, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, how you might get started and kind of what some of the costs around the stations are. So Ranch Systems is a manufacturer, and we're also a software developer. We create and maintain the Ranch Cloud platform, and we partner with companies who work directly with growers through a distribution network. They provide installation services as well as additional consulting services that pair well with the type of equipment that they're using. So some of our local distributors are Advanced Viticulture, Coastal Viticultural Consultants, and Atlas Vineyard Management. You can definitely reach out to them if you want to get started. Definitely reach out to Tyler or I if you have questions. But just to give you kind of an idea of some of the costs of what we've shown today, a weather station with a soil moisture probe and an irrigation sensor runs around $3,600. Pump control station with a flow meter connection is around $1,600. And then our annual fee, which includes the cell service, proactive online health monitoring, everything you've seen today. So there's no kind of a la carte in the Ranch Cloud platform. It's all inclusive, including the SIM card that goes in the cell unit. You can have as many users as you'd like, which we find that a lot of growers really appreciate having a kind of a single source of truth for the vineyard, and being able to have those multiple users access that same information, from the irrigator to the field manager. They're looking at environmental conditions in the field for work crews, all the way through to your winemaker who wants really detailed graphs of what exactly was the weather leading up to harvest, and just verifying and confirming the decisions that are made in the field. So it's those discussions can get a little hairy, but having that shared source of truth often helps with that. All right, so before I go into questions, I do want to go back a few slides. Let's see here. So yeah, and just kind of elaborate a little bit more on some of these. So I want to talk about the pressure transducer in the drip line. Now, what we've developed, this is called the water use widget. And it takes a simple data stream like a pressure switch or a pressure transducer. And there's quite a few different ways we can display this data. So the standard is, kind of a tile with the current irrigation pressure, which is great, if you're looking to see how your drip system's performing, do you have enough pressure out to the lines? But we found over time, growers would tell us, well, this isn't exactly the most useful piece of information, which is, first of all, is my irrigation on or off? Second of all, how much did I apply and when did I apply it? So we've developed the water use widget in collaboration with our customers. And essentially this comes up every time there's a transducer in the system. So the user enters in their flow rate for that valve, and then they get to see their gallons applied. If they enter in the acres for the field, they can see how many gallons per acre, and then their rainfall equivalent units, inches applied, or as we call it here, acre inches per acre. And then down below, we see essentially a report, a table of each irrigation event, the runtime, and all those same details, except about just the one event. This station, this is actually a master irrigation control station, and it starts and stops the well pump, monitors the filter flushing, tracks the flow rate, and it also monitors the water level in the well. So this is just an example of what a typical station would do in the field if you installed one at your pump control station. And there are more functions that this unit can do. It was not fully loaded in this case. So these are multifunctional stations. They can connect quite a few instruments, and they're made to be reliable for the long term in the field. All right. So I've got our contact info on the next slide. Please reach out if you have any questions or comments. And also, we'd be happy to take any questions you have in chat at this time.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Thank you so much, Tyler. Appreciate your time and providing us with a little bit of information on what ranch systems can do. We are almost running out of time, but we still have 2 minutes. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and type them on the chat box. Ranch system has a lot to offer. There's a lot of different products that I personally don't understand all of it. My favorite is just being able to turn on and off irrigation and being able to maintain a good control of how much water is being irrigated or how much water is being put into the lines actually. So anybody interested on that, we have it on our vineyard, so you guys can come over and observe what we have installed. The probes are really high quality as well. Every now and then we just have to change batteries. That's pretty much what we have been doing so far. I'll give it another minute to see if anybody has questions for Terrence and Tyler. In the meantime, I will begin pretty much wrapping things up. I really appreciate everybody's time, all the speakers and all the attendees for taking the time to join us today. Water is one of our most precious resources, and for the farmer, it's probably the most important resource. No water, no plants, no food, no life, no economics, no nothing. So I'm very proud to work with all of you guys. I look forward to keep working with you guys, work with those of you that I haven't gotten a chance to work with, so that we can together help you conserve some water. Quick reminders, July 8th and 9th, we have our soil health workshop, which we're gonna be focusing on how we can assess, maintain, and enhance your soil health in your agricultural operations. I really encourage you, well, thank you, Ashley, that's great. I really encourage you guys to sign up for that. It would also be a Zoom free workshop, so I hope that we can see you there. I hope that you guys can join our newsletter. and that you guys can, both for the Napa RCD and also for the Soil Hub, we keep up a lot of information in there. And we just try to keep up with the latest and trying to provide you guys with the best information that we can. If there's any topics for workshops that you guys would like to hear about, please let me know. We will be sending out a survey just to get a little bit of your feedback on this workshop and what else you would like to see. But if there's any topics that you would like us to bring on future workshops, we're more than happy to do it. If it's something that I cannot present myself, I will get speakers that can talk about that. So I really thank you all. It looks like we don't have any other questions. You guys have my contact information. You have Ashley's contact information. Please reach out if you need anything. We're here to help. We love what we do and we're here for you. So thank you very much. Hope everybody has a great weekend.